The story began 249 years ago in a peaceful and stable land. On an ordinary day, people seemed busy with their usual lives, wandering through the markets and talking, unaware of the looming danger on the horizon. Suddenly, a huge portal appeared in the sky, heralding the beginning of a great disaster, as frightening creatures from another world descended from it. These creatures, which would later be called demons, immediately began a brutal attack on the humans. After their descent, the demons openly declared their invasion of humanity and began to spread destruction. And from here was the true beginning of the demons' invasion of humanity. Facing this dangerous situation, the Orthodox Alliance formed a group of warriors called the Orthodox Sky Demon Extermination Corps, and they announced that they would confront these invaders. But after only 3 days, they clashed with the Demon Legion in Manhwa and were tragically defeated. A year later, half the population of the Central Plains had been killed, and the warriors from the Orthodox and non-Orthodox factions tried to work together one last time, forming a final front of resistance in Sichuan. This final battle lasted for more than half a month of continuous fighting. Despite their efforts, 90% of the resistance army was killed, and the Mary of the Central Plains was completely annihilated. As for the few survivors, they became slaves and were cruelly dragged into the demon world. The protagonist of the story himself was one of those captives who were dragged into that terrifying world. After 5 years of captivity, torture, and horrific experiments, he was classified as a rare type due to his inability to use internal energy from birth. So, he was subjected to cruel experiments and turned into a living weapon. As a result, he became part of the demon world's subjugation army after undergoing intensive brainwashing. Decades later, he invaded other dimensions and participated in bloody massacres, killing many innocent people. He continued to kill relentlessly, in a bloody life full of massacres and gore. 75 years after being turned into a warrior slave, his brutal contributions were recognized, and he became a prestigious commander among the demons. 120 years after his promotion to the rank of commander, he became a fearsome and revered warrior. But at this time, he discovered a great secret that changed everything. He then spent 50 years of continuous research on the conditions and methods that would allow him to reveal this mysterious secret. After another 65 years, the great rebellion he had meticulously planned against the demons began. A week after the rebellion started, events reached the present time. But the loss was evident on the bloody battlefields. In a harsh confrontation with the Demon King himself, it was confirmed that his rebellion had tragically failed. The Demon King, Tarrant, expressed his deep disappointment in the protagonist, Schweitz, for his rebellion, despite all his previous contributions as a commander. The king then addressed him directly and insultingly, using his former name, Schweitz von Greentail, which prompted Schweitz to respond with violence and bitterness, vehemently rejecting the name he hated so much. And then Schweitz announced his real name, which he uttered with a defiant scream, "My name is Sapaigang." The Demon King Tarrant spoke, expressing his great confusion towards humans, explaining that he had been watching Sapaigang for a long time. While his abilities and talents were weak, he possessed a strange obsession with survival no matter the circumstances, which the king considered his only source of strength. The Demon King wondered why Sapaigang acted so recklessly after all these years, to which Sapaigang replied that he had to do it to experience the fight for himself at least once. He explained that this was necessary to ensure victory in the next confrontation, as he needed to know his true abilities against him. The Demon King found this thinking interesting, but also described it as naive and foolish. The king then told him that today would be the end of his life, and he would not give him a second chance. But Sapaigang refused to be killed by the Demon King, affirming with strong determination that he would not allow it. Despite the severe injuries he had received, Sapaigang shouted with all his might, and in a sudden moment he used a superhuman power. That caused a tremendous light to pierce through the place. Then the Demon King realized what was happening and said in amazement, surprised by the technique Sapaigang used, which was the return of time, saying it was the authority of Nozaron, the old master of evil. He then followed up by saying that he now understood everything. The king continued, saying that all the pain and defeat Sapaigang endured for 120 years were just for this moment. With overwhelming anger and great defiance, Sapaigang shouted in the Demon King's face, threatening him, and told him to just wait for the next time, when he would fight them all, and none of them would survive this time. Despite this, the Demon King only showed a sarcastic smile and affirmed that he looked forward to this challenge. Acknowledging Sapaigang for the first time as the only human he respected, then everything disappeared in a massive explosion. In another scene, the events returned to the Murim of the Central Plains, specifically 10 full years, before the demon invasion. The place appeared peaceful at the Dragon Spring Martial Arts Academy of the Orthodox Alliance. Some workers talked about the strange lightning that struck the roof of the training ground with enough force to destroy it. One of the workers mentioned with relief that the only person injured in this incident was that failure. It then became clear that the failure in question was Sapaigang, the martial arts instructor, who could not use internal energy. Although his injury was not severe, someone sarcastically expressed their wish that he had been seriously injured, because this very day was the date of his public execution. After that, the execution ceremony began in a special way, as an official announced the start of the formal duel for the position of assistant spear instructor at the Dragon Spring Academy. The duel began at the Dragon Spring Academy between the current assistant spear instructor, Sapaigang, and his challenger, Maing Sondiok, who was known by the title The Invincible Divine Spear, with the aim of verifying Sapaigang's eligibility for the assistant instructor position. Maing Son-deok stood smiling confidently, waiting for the duel to begin, stating that he thought Sa Pai-gang would evade the confrontation under the pretext of injury, especially after hearing about the incident of him being struck by lightning. Despite this, Sa Pai-gang stood firmly without showing any weakness or anxiety, which puzzled Maing Son-deok. The duel was officially announced to have begun, with a warning that both must fight honorably as true warriors. Initially, Maing Son-deok expressed his surprise at Sa Pai-gang's performance, saying that he seemed better than he had expected. Maing Son-deok mocked the lightning incident again, accusing Sa Pai-gang of perhaps fabricating this excuse to avoid facing him. But he ultimately decided to end the battle quickly, out of respect for his courage. Son-deok suggested that Sa Pai-gang should surrender in the distant future, completely underestimating him. Sa Pai-gang began to remember the past and how he suffered from everyone's contempt because he was an instructor at a martial arts academy without the ability to use internal energy. He remembered the humiliating defeat he had previously suffered in a public duel, how he lost his position as an instructor, and was forced to do demeaning and lowly jobs, which made him live through extremely harsh days. All of this made Sa Pai-gang prepare for this specific moment, which he had been eagerly awaiting. Maing Son-deok felt annoyed by Sa Pai-gang's words, as he did not understand them, and he asked angrily about the nonsense he was spouting, while Sa Pai-gang smiled defiantly and declared that he had waited a long time for this moment to face him. Maing Son-deok's anger grew because of the arrogance Sa Pai-gang displayed, and he said that he had intended to allow him some pride out of respect for being an instructor. Maing Son-deok began to use the bull demon spear art with great force, as he angrily declared that it was time to silence the arrogant Sa Pai-gang forever. His eyes appeared to be glowing with anger, as he launched a massive attack using the first form Wild Bull's charge. Son-deok was surprised when he felt no impact from his attack on his spear at all, which increased his confusion. Sa Pai-gang mockingly replied that his attack looked good, but it needed to hit its target first to have any meaning. Son-deok tried to attack Sa Pai-gang again with great force and intense anger, but the latter managed to dodge it with surprising ease. Maing Son-deok was stunned, wondering to himself how Sa Pai-gang managed to dodge his attack so simply. Even though he had heard he was extremely weak, Maing Son-deok refused to believe what had happened and considered it to be just a matter of luck on Sa Pai-gang's part. Son-deok launched another more ferocious attack than before, leaping into the air with force, while screaming in anger. At the peak of his rage, he announced his use of the fourth form of the bull demon spear, and he unleashed his final attack with immense power as he screamed at the top of his lungs, wishing death upon Sa Pai-gang. As the duel intensified, Sa Pai-gang appeared extremely focused and calm as he prepared to block his opponent Maing Son-deok's attack. He began to execute graceful and swift movements with his spear, forming a solid defensive barrier. After that, he took a combat stance with great confidence, ready for the confrontation. Maing Son-deok laughed with loud sarcasm, asserting the impossibility of these humble spear techniques withstanding his powerful attack. At that moment, Sa Pai-gang surprised everyone by using a very strange and amazing technique he called Fireball, which he created with his hand and launched toward his opponent. Shock appeared on Son-deok's face. He couldn't comprehend what Sa Pai-gang said and couldn't believe what he was seeing. The fireball exploded with immense force, knocking Maing Son-deok down amidst everyone's astonishment. The spectators looked on in a state of shock and horror at what they had just seen. Son-deok began to roll on the ground, trying to extinguish the fire that had ignited on his body, screaming in terror. The duel was immediately declared over, after Sa Pai-gang's superiority was proven in a decisive and shocking way for all. He was officially declared the winner of the duel and the assistant instructor. Sa Pai-gang's memory returned to the past, where he was captured alive by the demons. He remembered how he was dragged to the demon world and how he struggled to survive there for long centuries. During that time, he realized something very important, that using combat techniques like hit-yang and high-level magic is not so different from traditional martial arts. In the present, his opponent's body lay on the ground, burned and in severe pain. With light sarcasm, Sa Pai-gang waved for the staff to remove his opponent from the arena, commenting on the quality of the duel. The attendees, students and spectators, began to discuss what happened, wondering if the technique Sa Pai-gang used was truly a martial art. The officials also expressed their displeasure and extreme confusion, wondering how Sa Pai-gang could do such a thing, considering what happened to be nonsense and illogical. Despite everyone's astonishment and some's anger, an official approached Sa Pai-gang to congratulate him on his victory. But he expressed his confusion and asked him how he used internal energy despite their knowledge of his inability to do so. Sa Pai-gang replied with a calm smile that what happened was just a stroke of luck. Sa Pai-gang explained the matter sarcastically, saying that a few days ago he found a strange herb while wandering, and after eating it, he suddenly found himself able to use enormous amounts of internal energy. This sarcastic explanation led to intense displeasure from the officials, who considered his words dismissive and disrespectful. As the anger and resentment from the officials continued, Sa Pai-gang said coldly that it was their right to believe his words or reject them, and he wondered if it really mattered. Then he asserted that he did not cheat in the duel. It was a competition for the position of assistant spear instructor, and there were no rules preventing him from using techniques other than the spear. Sa Pai-gang expressed his surprise at being subjected to this investigation and doubt, despite his fair and clear victory in the duel. At that point, an angry official tried to respond to him, but another official intervened, trying to de-escalate the situation, telling his angry colleague that he should calm down. In the end, the officials calmly and officially acknowledged Sapaigang's victory in this duel, confirming their recognition of the battle's result despite their astonishment at what had happened. After the duel ended and Sapaigang was declared the winner, an official was about to speak to give the next instructions, but Sapaigang quickly interrupted him, explaining to everyone that as long as all the officials were present, he had an important request. He stuck his spear into the ground, and then formally requested to be allowed to take a test for promotion from assistant instructor to official instructor. After that, Sapaigang was seen walking inside the academy amidst the astonishment of the students and other assistants, who began to whisper about him with curiosity, pointing him out as the person who had won the duel. Sapaigang turned towards the students who were talking about him with a confident look, without showing any annoyance. A general view of the Dragon Spring Academy appeared, which is one of the martial arts training institutions established by the Orthodox Alliance, with the aim of training fighters who would later become main pillars of the Alliance. The academy clarifies that it accepts students from well-known families and sects, and the training is handled by professional instructors who are divided into assistants and official instructors. The assistant's task is mainly to help the official instructors in teaching the young students. Sapaigang entered a room in the academy to face a person who was waiting for him, and asked him with clear interest what had happened to him, and how he was suddenly able to use internal energy. It turned out that this person was Jin Baek, the head of the Body Recovery Pavilion at the academy, who was a doctor responsible for treating the sick, not an instructor. Sapaigang repeated what he had said before, that it was just a stroke of luck, which greatly angered Jin Baek, who reminded him that he had treated him for a long time and made tremendous efforts to try to fix his problem with internal energy, and he considered this explanation an insult to him. Jin Baek felt bitterness and sorrow, and wondered sadly about the point of all his efforts if it was that simple. Jin Baek appeared completely devastated and expressed his deep shame in facing Sapaigang, apologizing profoundly for what happened, explaining that he was well aware of how Sapaigang had suffered from hatred because of that problem of his. At this moment, it was clear that Sapaigang was moved by Jin Baek's words, admitting to himself that this man had never changed and was like a true father to him. His memory went back 542 years, to when Jin Baek had saved him as a child from a fire started by a bandit attack. And he also remembered that Jin Baek himself had died on that day while saving other people. But Sapaigang decided that this time would be different, and he firmly gripped Jin Baek's hand, assuring him that he would ensure he stayed alive, and asked him not to blame himself or worry about him. Jin Baek seemed surprised by these words, but Sapaigang reassured him and asked him to just trust him, confirming that he would solve all the problems from now on. After that, Sapaigang appeared in his room in the evening, looking at the sky through the window, contemplating. Sapaigang summoned a magical power in his hand, and a bright blue light appeared. He then clarified to himself that when he returned to the past, he lost more than 90% of his former magical energy, and that the most he could currently do is use magic from the 4th circle only. Sapaigang expressed his disappointment. It had taken him centuries to reach the 8th circle of magic, but he checked his feelings and affirmed that he should be grateful that he still possessed his current magical energy. With determined eyes and intense resolve, he assured himself that he had indeed returned from that hell he had previously lived in. He recalled memories of his return from a dark timeline, describing that world as a true hell. Sapaigang explained that history has been turned back, and the demons of the Jiangmurim world have not yet begun their invasion, but he firmly asserted that the word yet is the key. He pointed out that 10 years from now, the invasion will begin again, and Jiangmurim will collapse once more. But this time, Sapaigang affirmed that things would be completely different, because he retains memories amounting to 300 years of experience and knowledge. He has precise information about the type of magic the demon army uses, as well as the tools and weapons they prepared for the invasion. And most importantly of all, he knows exactly how to eliminate the Demon King himself. Meanwhile, the pavilion head Jin Baek knocked on Sapaigang's door and asked if he was in the room. Sapaigang confirmed he was there and asked what he wanted. Jin Baek told him that the academy's vice director, Cheon Simyong, was looking for him. Sapaigang was surprised that the vice director sent this message through Jin Baek, but Jin Baek asserted that he didn't care much about that, and what concerned him more was his worry for Sapaigang himself. Jin Baek predicted that Cheon Simyong's request would be related to the promotion test Sapaigang had asked for, and he advised him to be careful. He added that the test would certainly be difficult, especially since Maing Sun Deok, who lost to Sapaigang, was the person Cheon Simyong had recommended, and it was clear he held a great grudge against him. After that, Jin Baek wondered about Sapaigang's sudden desire to become an official instructor, to which Sapaigang replied with a confident smile that it was the first step towards reforming this academy. Sapaigang recalled a memory from the past, where the Dragon Spring Academy was once famous, and considered one of the top 3 orthodox martial arts academies. But 2 years ago, the academy's director, who was among the top 10 martial arts masters, suddenly vanished without a trace. The academy searched for him for 2 full years to no avail, and it was extremely difficult to find a replacement of the same caliber, which led to a significant decline in the academy's reputation. Sapaigang headed towards the meeting room and opened its door, preparing to face the vice director. Cheon Simyong, the vice director and head of sword technique instruction, began the meeting by asking if Sapaigang was serious about his request for promotion. Inwardly, Sapegang described Cheon Si-myung as the main reason for the deterioration and fall of the Dragon Spring Academy. Despite that, he smiled and replied with apparent respect, confirming that he was, of course, completely serious in his request, addressing him by the title Vice Director. Sapegang opened the door to the room, preparing for the meeting that awaited him. He entered the room where the Academy's Vice Director, Cheon Si-myung, was waiting for him, along with a senior instructor. Cheon began the conversation by confirming the promotion request that Sapegang had submitted. Cheon Si-myung asked him with extreme seriousness if he was truly serious about the promotion request he had submitted. Sapegang stared at the vice director with a deep and determined gaze. His memory suddenly flashed back to the day of the demon invasion, when the academy was engulfed in flames. In that moment, he remembered his own miserable state amidst the destruction and chaos. Sapegang remembered how huge rifts appeared everywhere, from which monsters no one had ever seen before emerged, and these monsters began to kill people mercilessly. That was the moment the catastrophic invasion, which was named the Demon Race, began. He also remembered the young students from the Dragon Spring Academy, and how they were brutally killed by those terrifying monsters. On that shocking day, he remembered one of the students, calling out to an instructor for help, but the instructors had fled, leaving them behind. Sapegang recalled how Vice Director Cheon Si-myung was the first to flee the invasion site, and if he hadn't fled at the beginning, the academy might have avoided that terrifying fate. The screams of the students who were sacrificed that day echoed in his mind as he stood before the two men in the room. Then Sapegang affirmed to himself that all those events had not happened yet, as he had now returned to the past. Nevertheless, he assured himself that he would never forget Cheon Si-myung's hypocritical and disgusting face. Then he smiled a sarcastic smile and asked him with apparent politeness what he wanted from him. Cheon Si-myung calmly told him that he would inform him of the test details, and that the required test for his promotion to official instructor would be to raid the demonic knight stronghold. Sapegang seemed a little surprised and asked for clarification if the vice director meant the group of bandits on the mountain behind the academy, and Cheon confirmed that he indeed meant them, and that the test was to kill them. It was clarified that the demonic knight stronghold was the headquarters of a group of bandits who had stationed themselves on the old sacred mountain near the academy, and this group had caused significant damage to the local population. Sapegang took the paper bearing the test details, signed by Vice Director Cheon Si-myung, read it carefully and said calmly, "All right." Then Sapegang wondered what this test had to do with his job as a martial arts instructor, to which Cheon Si-myung replied with visible anger that this test was considered a fundamental requirement for any official instructor. Then the other senior instructor, Byung Ryo-hyung, affirmed that the official instructors are the core strength of the academy. The senior instructors of the academy were introduced, such as Cheon Si-myung and Byung Ryo-hyung, as well as Byok and Sang Pil-ji, explaining their great skills and their recognition by the Orthodox Alliance as masters of martial arts. Byung Ryo-hyung proudly asserted that they had all accomplished great deeds, such as eliminating leaders of evil martial arts and bandits. At that point, Sapegang interrupted them indifferently and asked coldly, "How much time do I have?" Vice Director Cheon Si-myung answered with complete clarity that he had exactly 2 weeks, and if he was late by even 1 day, he would lose his chance for promotion forever. Sapegang smiled confidently and repeated calmly with a sarcastic smile on his face, 2 weeks? As he was leaving the room in front of Vice Director Cheon Si-myung, Sapegang announced that he would return in just 3 days, thereby ignoring the 2-week deadline the Vice Director had set for him. This act angered the senior instructor, Byung Ryo-hyung, who lost his composure and called Sapegang an arrogant little brat, while the Vice Director seemed to be lost in silent thought. Instructor Byung expressed his anger again and asked the Vice Director emotionally if he really intended to promote that arrogant person. But Cheon Si-myung reassured him with a malicious smile that there was no need to worry, and sarcastically assured him that the poor assistant instructor Sapegang would never return. Meanwhile, Sapegang left the place very quickly using the haste spell, while angrily affirming to himself that Cheon Si-myung was just a hypocrite and that he was fully aware of what he was planning. Sapegang began to think about the demonic knight stronghold and recall his information about it, noting that it had appeared around the same time the Green River Forest Alliance began to gain fame, and that the available information about it was very scarce. At the same time, the other instructor was extremely shocked by the information the vice director was revealing about the stronghold's leader, asking in astonishment if he was serious in what he was saying. The vice director, Cheon Si-myung, confirmed with a sarcastic tone that the leader of the demonic knight stronghold was Ak Gogyeom, who is an extremely dangerous and ferocious martial master, and that he is known as the former leader of an evil sect called the Sky-Shattering Sect. He explained that although everyone thought he had died at the hands of traitors years ago, he survived, tracked down all who betrayed him and killed them brutally, and became hunted by numerous sects because of his bloody revenge, and had been hiding in this area recently. The other senior instructor expressed his astonishment at the secret information the vice director knew, and asked him with surprise how he had obtained these details, but the vice director just laughed and told him that it wasn't important now. Cheon Si-myung continued, saying that although Sapegang had shown surprising strength in the previous duel, it was only possible because he had hidden his true abilities. But he added that this mission was a real test and not just a duel, and therefore, he was completely confident that Sapegang would not return from it alive. Meanwhile, Sapegang was moving very quickly towards his target. and he realized that if Ak Gogyeom was as strong as he remembered, the fourth circle magic he currently possessed would not be enough to defeat him. But Sa Paigang suddenly realized that the solution was simple, and he reached the intended location with extreme speed, where he began to descend using the levitation spell. As soon as Sa Paigang reached the entrance of the target location, he decided that he would increase his magical energy and elevate his magic level to a higher circle. Sa Paigang remembered that his original magical knowledge and experience were already equivalent to the 8th circle level, and he used the search spell to explore the place thoroughly. Sa Paigang noticed that from the outside, the place looked like an ordinary cliff, but upon touching it, he discovered that there was a hidden magical barrier, made of magical energy, mana. Sa Paigang smiled confidently and assured himself that he had reached the right place, and that no one would have imagined the existence of such hidden places in the Central Plains. Sa Paigang advanced inside the hidden place behind the magical energy mana barriers, and immediately noticed the presence of a rare special grade mana stone. He explained to himself that this stone is the key to the demon's power, which they rely on to restore their energy when invading different dimensions. Sa Paigang remembered the weakness of the interdimensional travel technique used by the demons, where the travel speed of living things and inanimate objects differs greatly, a problem the demons have not yet been able to solve. The solution the demons resorted to was to plant the equipment they would need in the future in the dimensions they planned to invade, including these rare mana stones. Sa Paigang noted that this stone was worthless to the humans of the Central Plains, because they are unable to use mana, at least for now. But as soon as he touched the stone, Sa Paigang unleashed an immense and powerful energy. The place shook and the ground cracked from the powerful explosion of energy that Sa Paigang released. And then on the evening of that day, there was a group of men who approached quickly to check the source of the sound. These men appeared to be followers of the demonic knight stronghold, and among them was their leader, Ak Gogyeom. One of his followers cautiously asked if there was anything unusual, but Ak Gogyeom became angry, accused him of questioning his senses, and told him to be quiet and search thoroughly, asserting that he had felt a powerful energy explosion in the area. While they were searching, they were surprised by the sound of clapping from above, and it turned out that Sa Paigang was sitting relaxedly on a high rock, mocking them, saying he was sure that Ak Gogyeom was a top-level martial master. Ak Gogyeom grew angry and asked him with a sharp tone who he was, to which Sa Paigang replied with a provocative smile that he was an instructor at the Dragon Spring Academy. The followers began to wonder with surprise and concern why an instructor from the Dragon Spring Academy was here in their stronghold, but Ak Gogyeom angrily ordered them to be quiet. Ak Gogyeom asked Sa Paigang if he was the one who caused the previous energy explosion, to which Sa Paigang replied with a confident and provocative smile, "What if I was?" At this moment, without hesitation, Ak Gogyeom launched a sudden and violent attack on Sa Paigang, telling him that he would kill him and that this was the reason he came to this place in the first place. Ak Gogyeom was very shocked when he heard Sa Paigang's voice, mocking him and asking if that was really what he was going to do. The events began with a powerful attack from Ak Gogyeom, who rushed with great force towards Sa Paigang, trying to eliminate him with a decisive blow. But Sa Paigang easily countered his attack, using a powerful spell in the form of a blade of magical energy called Mana Blade, which injured Ak Gogyeom's followers and astonished him. Sa Paigang continued his attack with clear sarcasm and disdain, using the spell Trice, and told Ak Gogyeom in a clear tone of challenge that he came here specifically to kill him. The conflict between them intensified into a violent clash, in which they exchanged extremely powerful blows. With a provocative smile, Sa Paigang gave Ak Gogyeom a sarcastic piece of advice, saying it would be better for him to avenge his slain followers, which greatly angered Ak Gogyeom. Ak Gogyeom shouted in astonishment and intense anger, questioning Sa Paigang's true identity. The two sides exchanged violent and successive blows, which continued for a very long time, without either of them being able to gain control of the situation. During the fight, Sa Paigang once again confirmed his identity as an instructor from the Dragon Spring Academy with a confident smile as he skillfully parried all of his opponent's blows. Ak Gogyeom was stunned and shocked, as he couldn't believe that there was someone capable of countering him so easily, and he realized that Sa Paigang was not taking him seriously at all. In a moment of intense anger, Ak Gogyeom let out a powerful scream and a fierce attack in a final attempt to overcome his opponent. But Sa Paigang easily dodged the attack using his high speed and superior combat skills. Ak Gogyeom decided to resort to using his strongest secret techniques, the sky-shattering divine domination arts, and activated the core release technique, raising his power level to a frightening extent. Ak Gogyeom was furious that his opponent had pushed him to use this powerful technique, screaming at Sa Paigang that he would deeply regret it. At the peak of his rage, Ak Gogyeom revealed his painful past and his suffering after being betrayed, and how he gathered all this negative energy to direct it towards revenge. But he was surprised by Sa Paigang's coldness and contempt, who paid no attention to this, and responded mockingly, saying, "Who asked?" He told him he didn't care at all about any information about an evil person. In a shocking moment, Sa Paigang cast a very powerful spell called Freeze Wave, which completely froze Ak Gogyeom in his place, leaving him stunned. Before Ak Gogyeom could realize what was happening, Sa Paigang cast another powerful spell called Astral Chain, which completely bound his opponent. Ak Gogyeom tried hard to break free from these restraints, but his attempts were completely futile. Sa Paigang explained confidently that this spell was originally designed to deal with people who use internal energy, thus completely paralyzing his movement. Ok Gogeom wondered with intense anger how Sapaigang could be capable of using such magic, accusing him of possibly being from the demon sect. But Sapaigang calmly and contemptuously replied that it was mana and not magic, and belittled him by saying he didn't expect much from a mere bandit. Ok Gogeom was filled with rage and fury at Sapaigang's words and screamed at him that he was cursed. While he was bound and feeling his end approaching, Ok Gogeom expressed his regret and sorrow that his death would be in a place like this, to which Sapaigang replied calmly and coldly, asking him if he had any regrets. Ok Gogeom began to scream from intense pain and anger, declaring that he had not yet taken revenge on those who betrayed him, the people who manipulated his followers, when he was the leader of the sky-shattering sect. He recalled his bitter suffering, asserting that the reason he hid in these mountains and joined the demonic knight stronghold was all for the sake of revenge only. Ok Gogeom tried to continue narrating his motives, but he was interrupted by the sound of sarcastic applause from Sapaigang, who mockingly praised Ok Gogeom's insistence on revenge and his refusal to give up despite the difficulties, advising him with ridicule that revenge should be slow, thorough, and without despair. Ok Gogeom felt insulted and thought Sapaigang was mocking him, accusing him of being just a young man who had lived a comfortable life without any real knowledge of suffering. At this point, the expression on Sapaigang's face changed frighteningly, and he told him in a grim voice that he had not lived a comfortable life as he thought. Ok Gogeom felt terror from the frightening look in Sapaigang's eyes, and realized that there was something very wrong with his opponent. At that moment, Sapaigang decided to make Ok Gogeom experience his suffering for a little while, and test the same hell and suffering that he himself had endured for 200 years. Suddenly, Ok Gogeom found himself in a dark and strange place, not knowing where he was, and he began to feel extreme confusion and fear, and wondered about this strange place. Then, terrifying visions of the frightening future that awaited in 10 years appeared before him, and he witnessed hordes of terrifying demons, invading and destroying everything in their path, with horrific scenes of death and torment. Ok Gogeom began to scream in extreme terror, and he couldn't bear these terrifying visions that had suddenly invaded his mind. Then Sapaigang brought him back to reality and sarcastically asked him how his experience was, calmly explaining to him that what he had just seen is the future that will happen in 10 years. Ok Gogeom collapsed on the ground from terror and psychological pain, and began to beg Sapaigang with extreme weakness to kill him, and end his life because he could no longer bear what he had seen. Sapaigang replied calmly, explaining that he understood his request very well, then prepared to carry out his death sentence, asserting that although the matter is difficult, there is someone who must do it. Meanwhile, elsewhere at the Dragon Spring Academy, Vice Director Cheon Simyong felt shock and disbelief as he stared at Ok Gogeom's massive weapon in front of him, realizing that Sapaigang had actually succeeded in the difficult mission he had assigned him. Sapaigang threw Ok Gogeom's head in front of Vice Director Cheon Simyong, sarcastically explaining that he didn't expect them to believe him if he only brought the sword, which is why he brought Ok Gogeom's head as additional proof. Then Sapaigang smiled with sarcasm and confidence and suggested they begin discussing his new duties after his promotion to the position of first instructor. The next morning at the Dragon Spring Academy, the instructor's reactions to the news of Sapaigang's success were quite dramatic. The senior instructor of the fist technique, Yu Wonjin, shouted his disbelief and anger at this news. Instructor Yu Wonjin continued to express his extreme astonishment and displeasure, describing Sapaigang as the academy's former disgrace and questioning how he suddenly became a first instructor. On the other hand, the senior instructor of the archery technique, Eon Byok, questioned whether Sapaigang had actually raided the demonic knight stronghold alone. The senior instructor of the sword technique, Dyung Bo Hyung, answered them, confirming that he himself went to the old sacred mountain to verify the matter. Dyung Bo Hyung explained that he found the bodies of the bandits, and specifically Ok Gogeom's body, in the exact location Sapaigang had told them about. Dyung Bo Hyung continued speaking with great hesitation and confusion, stating that he didn't know how it had happened. He added that, with the exception of Ok Gogeom, the necks of all the followers had been severed with a single strike, which raised everyone's suspicion and astonishment. At that point, a heated debate began among the instructors, where they objected to what they saw of Sapaigang's skills, especially since he was known as a spear instructor, not a sword instructor. But Vice Director Cheon Simyong intervened firmly and stopped the argument, asking them what they were doing. The instructors immediately apologized to the Vice Director, while Cheon Simyong sat thinking silently about the matter. Meanwhile, Vice Director Cheon Simyong was thinking deeply, telling himself that it was completely illogical for Sapaigang to be able to kill Ok Gogeom and his followers by himself. He remembered that he himself had met Ok Gogeom and realized his great strength, which is why he saw it as impossible for him to be killed easily by Sapaigang. Cheon Simyong wondered if Jin Baek, the doctor at the academy, had helped Sapaigang in his mission, but he quickly dismissed the idea because Jin Baek did not have sufficient skills. Cheon Simyong decided that he had to investigate the matter further, so he asked instructor Dyung Bo Hyung to contact the Ghost Shadow Palace. It was explained that the Ghost Shadow Palace is one of the largest assassination organizations in the Murim world, and they are known for carrying out any mission for money. Vice Director Cheon asked Instructor Dyung to submit a request to the Ghost Shadow Palace to find out all information related to Sapaigang, including what he does daily, which surprised the other instructors. The senior instructor Yu Wonjin received a list from the Vice Director, and when he asked about it, the Vice Director reassured him, saying that he had an idea about the matter. Instructor Yu Wan-jin read the paper the vice director had given him and wondered in confusion about its contents. The vice director explained to him that it was a list of the students Sa Pai-gang would be responsible for after his promotion. Instructor Yu Wan-jin was extremely surprised by what he read on the list, and his eyes widened in astonishment when he understood the vice director's intention. Instructor Yu Wan-jin expressed his great admiration for the vice director's clever idea, and Cheon Simyong confirmed that he had used his position well. Instructor Yu Wan-jin laughed, saying that Sa Pai-gang might leave his job even before the Ghost Shadow Palace gets any information about him, and the vice director agreed with a laugh, saying that this was possible because he was inexperienced. One of the instructors asked Instructor Deong if he had given the same list to Sa Pai-gang, and Deong replied that he had indeed done so. The other instructor asked about Sa Pai-gang's reaction, and Deong replied that he merely gave a faint smile and said he understood everything. Meanwhile, as Sa Pai-gang was leaving the place, he thought to himself sarcastically, and described these old instructors as fools because they did exactly what he had expected them to do. Sa Pai-gang continued his train of thought, confirming that he had returned to this specific time and place for an important reason. And as he walked, he deeply remembered the power he had received from Nazaran and his ability to return in time, and began to ask himself repeatedly, what must I do to prepare for the demon invasion? He clearly realized that he could not face the demon army that had conquered many dimensions by himself. There are limits to what a single person can do. Sa Pai-gang clearly realized that there were many things he could do to counter the demon invasion, but he concluded that the best option was to form a strong army to confront them. And as he thought, Sa Pai-gang ruled out the idea of his army being composed of weaklings like those who had died before he traveled back in time. Instead, he wanted a powerful army proficient in all types of magic and martial arts. Sa Pai-gang looked at the students who had been classified as troublemakers among the first-year disciples and decided to focus on them first. He noticed that some of these students truly possessed great talents, but their difficult temperaments and personalities were hindering their progress. Among these disciples were some who had no apparent talent or were neglected by the teachers because they did not belong to prestigious families. Sa Pai-gang believed that the senior instructors at the academy had deliberately chosen these students, thinking he would not be able to handle them, but they never imagined the truth about these students. He recalled two heroes who had emerged prominently during the period of the demonic invasion. One was a master of the sword and the leader of the Heavenly Sword Alliance, who had led the Murim's resistance against the demons. The other hero he remembered was a masterful archer in martial arts who led a specialized squad for assassinations and infiltration and had single-handedly killed the largest number of demons. Sa Pai-gang smiled as he looked at the disciples standing before him, confident that these two legendary heroes he remembered from the future were currently right before his eyes. Elsewhere in the academy, the student Tan Li-jong was being violently beaten by Gok Boik during combat training. Tan Li-jong fell to the ground, screaming in pain from the powerful blow he received from Gok Boik. Then Gok Boik said in a sharp tone that the external arts training was not over yet and ordered Tan Li-jong to stand up to continue the training. But Tan Li-jong, the eldest student from the one-star sword family, begged Gok Boik with difficulty to stop hitting him. Gok Boik became angry at Tan's request and told him that others might think he was bullying him if he kept complaining like this. Gok Boik continued to provoke Tan Li-jong, saying he should be grateful that he was teaching him his special martial arts technique, but Tan Li-jong replied weakly that the fighting style he learned from his family was the only one he was good at. Gok Boik mocked Tan severely when he heard the name of the one-star sword family and ridiculed the value of their techniques. He continued to humiliate Tan, pointing out that those weak martial arts would never enable him to defend himself, and asked if he wanted to continue learning them. Tan Li-jong felt anger and frustration from Gok Boik's words and clenched his fist tightly, trying to suppress his anger. But a disciple suddenly intervened and told Gok Boik to open his fist and stop provoking Tan, or else they would have to have a new duel. Gok Boik felt provoked by this student's challenge, but he quickly unclenched his fist and walked away, realizing he couldn't face him right now. Then Yoon Wook-young, the student from the devastating sword family, intervened and ordered Gok Boik to stop causing trouble, especially with the exams approaching. Gok Boik backed down from the situation, saying he understood, but he gave a final warning to Tan Li-jong to consider himself lucky this time. Tan Li-jong thanked his classmate who intervened to save him from this difficult situation, but he looked confused and sad. Yoon Wook-young turned towards him without saying anything, and he seemed to be thinking deeply about what had happened. Tan Li-jong sat alone and silent after that painful confrontation, showing signs of frustration and despair. At this moment, someone came into the room and called for the three students, Yoon Wook-young, Gok Boik, and Tan Li-jong. Gok Boik answered, wondering about the reason for the sudden summons, and the messenger told them that Vice Director Cheon Simyong had informed him of a new decision. The messenger announced that the three of them were no longer part of the Camellia class, but would be transferred to a newly created class, which greatly surprised and astonished Gok Boik. And elsewhere, Sa Pai-gang stood facing the new group of students who had been specially chosen for him, who were looking at him with anticipation and caution, while he appeared confident and ready to begin his new duties. Sa Pai-gang greeted the disciples with a calm smile, announcing himself as their official instructor starting from this day. Some disciples were surprised by what was happening, and Yoon Wook-young seemed slightly annoyed as he wondered what was going on, while another student showed signs of astonishment. Suddenly, the disciple Gok Boik shouted in extreme anger from afar, demanding a stop to what he described as nonsense. Gok Boik approached Sa Pai-gang angrily, expressing his displeasure at his sudden transfer to a new class with an instructor who was, in his view, weak in abilities. Gokboik continued his objection, shouting that he would not listen to orders from someone who couldn't even use internal energy until recently. Sapaegang calmly looked at Gokboik and told him that his way of speaking to his supervising instructor was completely disrespectful. Gokboik continued to curse at Sapaegang with anger and contempt, pointing out that he didn't know how Sapaegang got the position of first instructor. He asserted that he would learn nothing from an instructor who had only recently been able to use internal energy, which increased the tension. In a sudden moment, Sapaegang used the blink spell, appearing directly in front of Gokboik with immense speed, ready to take disciplinary action. Gokboik was shocked and confused by what happened, not comprehending how Sapaegang managed to get so close to him so quickly. Gokboik let out a scream of terror as he faced the instructor, who had suddenly and unexpectedly appeared before him. Then Sapaegang calmly said that the Academy's regulations, Article 3, Clause 5, allow him to punish a student who shows misconduct for the purpose of guiding and instructing them. Gokboik became enraged and clenched his fist, preparing to attack. He then launched his attack using the powerful and violent, mountain-shattering Dragon Tiger fist technique. Sapaegang easily avoided the attack, expressing his displeasure with Gokboik's disrespectful language and violent behavior towards his instructor. He then calmly added that using internal arts in class without permission is another violation of the rules. Gokboik tried to attack again, but Sapaegang quickly interrupted him, saying that the worst thing he did was the successive bad actions. Sapaegang delivered a swift, powerful punch towards Gokboik, causing the latter to feel great shock and clear pain. Gokboik screamed loudly from the intense pain and began to feel weak in front of the instructor he had previously thought was weak. Sapaegang continued to talk about the weakness of Gokboik's combat skills, noting that he was not at the level he had expected. Sapaegang began a rapid and successive series of blows that hit Gokboik hard, showing clear superiority. He delivered a final knockout blow to Gokboik, causing him to fall to the ground in a humiliating manner. Gokboik fell to the ground in pain and unable to resist, with a look of anger and annoyance on his face. Sapaegang ordered him to stand up, asserting that his guidance and instruction were not over yet. Tanlijong watched the scene in great shock and amazement, not believing what he was seeing of Sapaegang's superiority over Gokboik. He remembered the strength of his classmate Gokboik, who was known as one of the strongest new disciples in external arts training, and felt extremely confused by his swift defeat at the hands of Sapaegang. Gokboik struggled to stand up again, cursing at Sapaegang with clear anger. But Sapaegang countered his new attack with complete ease and delivered another knockout blow that sent him to the ground a second time. The other disciples watched the scene in great shock and with clear concern on their faces. Sapaegang advanced towards the fallen Gokboik and expressed his displeasure at the poor state the class had reached on the very first lesson, directing his stern gaze towards the defeated disciple. Sapaegang calmly expressed his regret for what was happening, saying that an instructor's role is to stop their students' tears and teach them correctly, as he prepared to punish Gokboik. Gokboik appeared to be in a state of terror and shock, raising his hands in an attempt to defend himself against Sapaegang's impending attack. Sapaegang moved very quickly towards Gokboik, while the other disciples seemed to watch the scene with great astonishment and concern. Meanwhile, Yoon Wook-young intervened, expressing his opinion that Sapaegang's actions towards the student were excessive, addressing Sapaegang with apparent respect. Sapaegang turned towards Yoon Wook-young with a calm smile, commenting that he had finally made a move, as if he had been waiting for his intervention from the beginning. At this moment, Sapaegang remembered that in the future, Yoon Wook-young would be the leader of the Heavenly Sword Alliance, which reflects this student's future importance and great strength. Sapaegang remembered Yoon Wook-young from the first-year Camellia class as the second son of the devastating Sword Clan, which is one of the most famous and powerful clans in the Central Plains. From a young age, Yoon Wook-young was known within his clan for his exceptional genius in martial arts. Even among the new students at Dragon Spring Academy, he stood out for his superior skills. Yoon Wook-young's talent far surpassed the level of Dragon Spring Academy. At the age of 20, he managed to become a high-class martial master and was ranked among the top 10 martial masters in the Orthodox Alliance. Yoon Wook-young was supposed to live a bright life full of success, becoming one of the most prominent and respected martial masters in the Central Plains. But all those dreams and ambitions vanished with the appearance of the demons, as the tragedy that completely changed the course of his life began. From the beginning of the demon invasion, Yoon Wook-young participated in more battles than anyone else and proved his valor and strength on the field. But Yoon's clan quickly became a primary target of intense demon attacks, leading to its complete annihilation, and all its members were killed except for Yoon Wook-young himself. Despite this catastrophe, Yoon Wook-young did not fall into despair or grief like others, but continued to resist and challenge. Yoon Wook-young traveled across the Central Plains, fighting countless battles with the demons, and gathered the survivors to form a united front of orthodox and non-orthodox sects. Even in desperate circumstances, Yoon Wook-young led the remaining martial artists in a final, desperate resistance against the demons. Sapaegang still clearly remembered Yoon Wook-young's courage in the battles he fought so valiantly. Yoon Wook-young always rushed to the front lines of the fight, and when he unleashed his dazzling sword energy, he would cut down the massive demonic beasts that seemed to cover the sky with a single blow. Undoubtedly, Yoon Wook-young was the hero and the last hope of the Central Plains. But in the present, after Sapaegang's return to the past, Yoon Wook-young was just an arrogant young man from a noble and ancient family. Sapaigang spoke to Yoon Wook-young in a challenging tone, noting that he had finally decided to intervene and face the situation. Here, Sapaigang turned to Yoon Wook-young, addressing him as Little Yoon, and sarcastically pointed out his delay in deciding to act. The two exchanged blows quickly, and Yoon Wook-young showed great skill in dodging Sapaigang's attack. Sapaigang smiled, commenting sarcastically that things were getting amusing. Yoon Wook-young responded, expressing his surprise at the sudden strength Sapaigang had acquired, even though he couldn't use internal energy until recently. Sapaigang said this was indeed unexpected, enjoying Yoon Wook-young's reaction. While Gokboik sat in pain and embarrassment from his loss, Yoon Wook-young pointed out that all Sapaigang was doing with his newfound power was showing off in front of the disciples. Yoon Wook-young asked sharply if this new power Sapaigang had obtained was related to those fateful encounters he talks about. Sapaigang thought to himself that Yoon Wook-young was smart and perceptive, wondering if he was genuinely curious about this matter. Sapaigang replied with a smile that if Yoon Wook-young followed his training diligently from now on, he might tell him this secret, but Yoon Wook-young coldly refused his offer. Yoon Wook-young said confidently that he didn't know what trick Sapaigang used to change the class rosters so quickly, but he would file a formal complaint with the academy. Yoon Wook-young added that he didn't care to learn from someone whose ego was inflated by a sudden stroke of luck. Then Yoon Wook-young turned and began to leave, and the rest of the students followed him, leaving Sapaigang standing alone. Sapaigang watched them walk away, and it seemed he had expected this behavior from them. Yoon Wook-young's followers continued to walk away towards the academic building, while Sapaigang remained watching them from a distance. The students exchanged glances, and signs of tension and anxiety about what had happened appeared on their faces. In the end, Sapaigang smiled to himself with a calm and sarcastic smile, as if he were satisfied with how things were developing. Sapaigang approached the student Tan Lee-jong, placed a hand on his shoulder, and asked him with a sarcastic smile if he thought there was nothing he could learn from him. Sapaigang continued speaking to Yoon Wook-young, saying that in just 10 days of his training, this student, Tan Lee-jong, would be able to defeat you. Clear signs of shock and tension appeared on Tan Lee-jong's face, who never expected his name to be used in such a challenge. Yoon Wook-young stopped suddenly, making a sound that reflected his great astonishment at what he had just heard. Yoon Wook-young turned sharply towards Sapaigang, asking him clearly what he had just said, not believing what he heard. Sapaigang smiled calmly and confidently, and affirmed that he was willing to repeat his words as many times as necessary, pointing out that in just 1 week of training, Tan Lee-jong would be able to defeat Yoon Wook-young easily. Then Sapaigang added that this student, whom Yoon Wook-young considered as weak as an insect, would become strong enough to defeat Yoon Wook-young. Tan Lee-jong felt extremely shocked, and turned towards the instructor, asking in confusion and panic what was happening. Before Tan Lee-jong could finish his question, Sapaigang forcefully placed his hand over Tan Lee-jong's mouth to prevent him from speaking, which increased Tan Lee-jong's anxiety. Yoon Wook-young's expression changed to anger and intensity, and signs of threat began to show on him, ready to confront Sapaigang. Yoon Wook-young asked sharply if Sapaigang was truly prepared to take responsibility for his words and his official challenge. Sapaigang replied with complete confidence and a sarcastic smile that he was, of course, ready to take responsibility for what he had said. Sapaigang proposed a bet to Yoon Wook-young on an official fight in 10 days between Yoon Wook-young and Tan Lee-jong, and Tan Lee-jong was confused and panicked by this proposal. He explained the terms of the bet, saying that if Tan Lee-jong wins, Yoon Wook-young must follow his training without any objection. Sapaigang continued that if Yoon Wook-young wins, he could do whatever he wanted, whether it was asking him to leave the academy, apologizing, or kneeling and begging. However, Yoon Wook-young said with disdain that he didn't need anything from Sapaigang. In return, Yoon Wook-young clarified that Sapaigang should be prepared for the confrontation that would happen between them in a week. Tan Lee-jong and Sapaigang watched Yoon Wook-young as he left, and the signs of tension were clear on their faces. Suddenly, Tan Lee-jong began to scream unexpectedly from shock, which surprised Sapaigang, who did not expect this sudden reaction. Tan Lee-jong raised his hands in clear panic, while Sapaigang tried to calm him down, feeling surprised by his reaction. But he continued to scream hysterically, prompting Sapaigang to tell him that his voice was annoyingly loud. Tan Lee-jong grabbed Instructor Sapaigang's clothes in a state of extreme panic, asking him what he had done and why he had put him in a confrontation with Yoon Wook-young. Sapaigang tried to calm Tan Lee-jong, asking him to let him go so he could explain why he chose this challenge, while Tan continued to scream that he had done nothing to deserve this. When Tan Lee-jong did not stop clinging to him, Sapaigang pushed him away forcefully, causing Tan Lee-jong to fall to the ground. Afterwards, Sapaigang announced the cancellation of today's lesson and asked all the students to leave, while Tan Lee-jong remained lying on the ground, exhausted. He told the students that the schedule for the next lesson would be sent to them individually tomorrow, while the students left, wondering what was happening. Tan Lee-jong began to bemoan his fate as he cried, complaining about the predicament he had fallen into because of this challenge. Sapaigang simply advised him to win the confrontation, wondering why Tan Lee-jong was necessarily assuming he would lose. Tan Lee-jong regretfully explained that he had lost in his first official match after entering the academy against Gokboik. He added sadly that he had lost humiliatingly in that fight, and ever since then Gokboik had been bullying him daily. Tan Lee-jong began to speak sorrowfully about his daily suffering due to the bullying from his classmate Gokboik, but despite that, he wanted to reveal a surprising fact about him. Tan Lee-jong explained that even the monster Gokboik was unable to touch Yoon Wook-young in a direct duel between them. He continued his speech, stating that Gok Boik was utterly defeated without being able to land even a single blow on Yoon Wook Young. Sapaigong listened to Tan Lee Jong's words and acknowledged that Yoon Wook Young indeed possessed an exceptional talent that could not be ignored. Tan Lee Jong added that Yoon Wook Young's talent in martial arts was very unique, even without the full support of the Yoon clan. Sapaigong smiled with confidence and calm, and told Tan Lee Jong not to worry about the confrontation. Then Sapaigong pointed to Tan Lee Jong with great confidence, assuring him that he was, in fact, stronger than Yoon Wook Young. Tan Lee Jong asked in extreme confusion what Sapaigong meant, as he did not comprehend his strange words. Sapaigong revealed a shocking truth, explaining that Tan Lee Jong in the future was himself the legendary archer who became famous for killing demons before time was turned back. In a moment of intense panic, Tan Lee Jong screamed loudly, refusing to accept what he was hearing. With clear emotion, Tan Lee Jong asserted that even if he accepted the idea of his instructor and his class suddenly changing, he didn't understand why he was chosen to publicly face Yoon Wook Young. Tan Lee Jong clearly expressed his annoyance and confusion, wondering why he specifically had to participate in a public duel against Yoon Wook Young. Sapaigong asked him if he hadn't yet understood the purpose of all this, explaining that Tan Lee Jong's victory in the duel would be clear proof of his abilities as an instructor. Tan Lee Jong continued to complain and question what he personally would gain from all this, expressing his frustration at being dragged into this confrontation. Sapaigong smiled mysteriously as he answered Tan Lee Jong's question, saying, "Revenge." Tan Lee Jong froze in shock and asked in extreme confusion what the instructor meant by the word revenge. Sapaigong sarcastically asked him if he wasn't the one who was always being beaten by Gok Boik, which stunned Tan Lee Jong. Sapaigong continued his speech, asking how Tan felt when he recently defeated Gok Boik, clearly provoking him. Sapaigong continued to provoke Tan Lee Jong, saying, "Did you feel excited or refreshed when you saw him defeated like that in front of you?" Then Sapaigong leaned his face close to Tan Lee Jong and asked him slyly, "Or did he feel angry because he couldn't get revenge himself?" With a wicked smile, Sapaigong told Tan Lee Jong that if he became strong enough to defeat Yoon Wook Young, he would certainly be able to get revenge on Gok Boik himself. Sapaigong asserted that in that case, even someone as weak as Tan Lee Jong would easily be able to achieve revenge with his own hands. Sapaigong approached Tan Lee Jong and asked him enticingly if this wasn't a wonderful gift for him. Tan Lee Jong seemed a bit hesitant, wondering in confusion if it was possible for him to become as strong as his instructor said. Sapaigong replied with absolute confidence, assuring him that he certainly could. Finally, Tan Lee Jong shouted with clear determination that he wanted to become stronger for himself only, not for revenge on Gok Boik. A wide suspicious smile appeared on Sapaigong's face as he declared with anticipation that he would make sure to see how possible that could be. Tan Lee Jong began his training immediately, and he appeared on the training ground facing a training dummy. In the final scene, Tan Lee Jong continued to train under the supervision and observation of Sapaigong, in a clear indication of the beginning of his journey towards strength. Sapaigong sat watching Tan Lee Jong train, suggesting that the time had come to assess his current skill level. Tan Lee Jong stood ready, imagining himself facing Yoon Wook Young, and Sapaigong urged him to use all his strength and combat skills. Tan Lee Jong took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves before beginning his serious training. Tan Lee Jong's training began, and he moved quickly towards his target with great focus. Tan Lee Jong attacked the training dummy decisively and swiftly. Tan Lee Jong delivered successive and violent blows toward the training dummy. He continued to deliver strong and successive blows, showing his great determination to display his full capabilities. Tan Lee Jong unleashed successive blows with speed and power, his face looking serious and full of determination. Tan Lee Jong's focus waned as he continued to train, and his eyes showed great fatigue. Sapaigong shouted, encouraging Tan Lee Jong to continue and not stop, asking him to exert all his strength. Tan Lee Jong let out a powerful scream and intensified his blows, using all his internal energy. Suddenly, a strange glow appeared in Tan Lee Jong's eyes, indicating that he felt something unusual during the training. Tan Lee Jong suddenly stumbled and fell violently to the ground due to losing control of his internal energy. Tan Lee Jong looked very exhausted as he coughed severely and tried to catch his breath with difficulty. Sapaigong watched the situation silently and calmly, studying Tan Lee Jong's condition carefully. Then Sapaigong commented with just one word, "Pathetic," which shocked Tan Lee Jong greatly. Sapaigong directly asked Tan Lee Jong if he was aware of his current problem. Tan Lee Jong explained with difficulty that he feels his internal energy disperses in a strange way whenever he tries to perform basic movements. Tan Lee Jong remembered that he initially thought he might have learned his clan's martial techniques incorrectly, but after training several times, he discovered he had no problems with the basic movements. Tan Lee Jong also explained that he thought there might be a defect in his internal energy or his meridian points, and he had his condition checked repeatedly within his clan, but no defect was found. Tan Lee Jong eventually concluded that he might lack talent or suffer from an unknown illness, but Sapaigong smiled and told him that was not the reason. Sapaigong explained to Tan Lee Jong that the real reason is that his meridian points are more spread out than those of ordinary people. Tan Lee Jong was surprised by what he heard and didn't fully grasp the meaning of Sapaigong's words. He wondered in confusion what Sapaigong meant by that, so he explained to him again clearly that his meridian points are more widely spread than usual. Sapaigong added that this rare condition is usually beneficial, but it becomes a problem because Tan Lee Jong is still young and lacks sufficient internal energy. He continued his explanation that all martial artists release their internal energy from the dantian to the meridian points. However, because Tan Lijiang's meridian points are wider than usual and his internal energy is weak, this energy disperses and does not concentrate properly. Therefore, his internal energy does not concentrate correctly, and it continues to dissipate and scatter instead of focusing during combat. Tan Lijiang felt great surprise because he had never heard of this before. Sapegang smiled calmly and confirmed that what he said was completely logical, suggesting that he could help him overcome this problem. Sapegang began to remember painful scenes from the past, where he saw himself among many scattered corpses on the battlefield, in a moment full of pain and chaos. He found himself seriously injured, his clothes torn and stained with blood, and he could barely move from extreme fatigue and injuries. Then Tan Lijiang appeared in another guise, wearing a cloak and hiding his face behind a mask, indicating a significant change in his personality and appearance. Sapegang remembered how in the past he had obtained certain information by chance, while standing in the midst of a field of destruction filled with monsters and corpses. The scene returned to the present, where Tan Lijiang appeared kneeling before Sapegang on the training ground, ready to receive advice and instructions. Tan Lijiang noticed the strange atmosphere around him and wondered to himself if Sapegang had a hidden story or reason behind this strange atmosphere. Sapegang smiled calmly and mysteriously and said he would end his explanation here, keeping some matters to himself. Sapegang approached Tan Lijiang enthusiastically and said that now that they knew the nature of the problem, they had to work on solving it immediately. Tan Lijiang was surprised by the possibility of a solution to his problem and expressed his great astonishment at Sapegang's confidence. Sapegang affirmed with great confidence that the solution was indeed very simple and explained that Tan Lijiang could overcome his problem of spread-out meridian points by increasing the amount of internal energy he possessed. But Sapegang admitted that it is difficult to significantly increase internal energy in a very short time. Sapegang pointed out that for now, he could teach Tan Lijiang only one way to overcome his problem. Sapegang instructed Tan Lijiang to focus on continuously gathering internal energy before starting his basic combat movements. Then Sapegang explained to Tan Lijiang that once he gathered enough energy, he could then effectively display his true strength. Tan Lijiang actually began to implement what Sapegang had said, and he dashed with great speed toward the training dummy, charged with energy. With a powerful and amazing move, Tan Lijiang managed to deliver a very strong blow. That shattered the training dummy and showed his true strength. An expression of joy and excitement appeared on Tan Lijiang's face after his success in correctly executing the attack. Sapegang stood watching this success, smiling with satisfaction and pride in his student. Tan Lijiang rushed towards Sapegang in a state of great joy, shouting enthusiastically, certain that his internal energy had not dispersed this time. Sapegang calmly reassured him that he had noticed his performance was good and told him not to worry, because he had performed excellently. Before collapsing from exhaustion, Tan Lijiang felt a great sense of euphoria and declared with excitement that he had never felt such strength and vitality in his life. But in a sudden moment, Tan Lijiang suddenly lost his balance and began to fall, losing control of his body. Tan Lijiang was confused as he fell to the ground, and he felt that he didn't understand what had happened to him. Tan Lijiang began to cough severely and asked weakly what had suddenly afflicted him. While he was lying on the ground extremely exhausted, Sapegang coldly asked him about his condition. Tan Lijiang admitted that he felt no strength left in his body. Sapegang reassured him that this was just a minor side effect resulting from using his meridian points correctly for the first time. Sapegang added that his body had not yet adapted to using the meridian points in the new way, which is why this state of exhaustion occurred. He told him not to worry too much, as these side effects would disappear automatically after a few months. Tan Lijiang was greatly surprised as he remembered that his duel with Yun Wook-young would be in just 1 week, not after a few months, as Sapegang had told him. The scene began with a calm view of the place where Tan Lijiang was training under Sapegang's supervision at Dragon Spring Academy. Sapegang launched a fierce blow with his weapon towards Tan Lijiang, telling him that he has 2 major problems he must overcome. Tan Lijiang stood listening carefully to Instructor Sapegang, paying attention to what he would say about the problems he faces. Sapegang explained that the first problem is when Tan releases all the internal energy he gathers in a single blow, which causes his body to collapse right after the strike. Sapegang added that the second problem is that Tan Lijiang's energy core is still small and cannot store a large amount of energy for a long time, and that trying to do so could lead to energy deviation, which is forbidden. Sapegang asked Tan Lijiang if he had understood everything he had explained so far. Tan replied with confidence and affirmation that he understood well. As Tan Lijiang stood somewhat confused, Sapegang began to move his weapon in preparation for the next step, prompting Tan to wonder about the reason for this movement. Sapegang told Tan that he must think carefully about how to face Yun Wook-young after the duel begins and asked him how much time he needs to gather his internal energy. Tan Lijiang replied hesitantly that he needs about 7 minutes to gather his energy. Sapegang asked in a firm tone how Tan intends to hold out against Yun Wook-young for this long period. Tan Lijiang felt confused and anxious, and asked Sapegang what he should do in this situation. Sapegang told him that the only solution is to avoid his opponent's attacks with all his might until he can gather his full energy. Sapegang surprised Tan Lijiang with a sudden attack, prompting Tan to scream in surprise while trying to avoid the blow. Tan Lijiang asked in panic what Sapegang was doing, as he felt he was being attacked for real. Sapegang shouted at Tan to focus, start gathering his energy, and never take his eyes off the opponent's weapon. Sapegang used an illusion technique, distracting Tan Lijiang's focus during the training. Tan Lijiang was extremely surprised when Sa Peigang broke through his defense with great speed and ease. He received a very powerful blow from Sa Peigang that knocked him to the ground, causing him to feel sharp pain. Tan Lijiang fell painfully to the ground in the middle of the training field. Tan Lijiang complained about the intensity of the pain, to which Sa Peigang coldly replied that he was complaining even though he hadn't used any internal energy in the strike. Sa Peigang ordered him to stand up to continue the training, which made Tan wonder in surprise if this was really real training. He confidently assured him that it was evasion training, which prompted Tan Lijiang to grumble about this strange training method. He approached Tan Lijiang very seriously, assuring him that he wasn't just doing this to humiliate or annoy him. Sa Peigang added that he had clearly explained the reason for his weakness and had shown him a practical way to overcome this weakness. Then Sa Peigang seriously affirmed that this was the only way Tan could even slightly harm Yun Wook-young in their upcoming duel in a week. Sa Peigang acknowledged the difficulty and harshness of this training, but asked Tan Lijiang if this difficulty was greater than the humiliation and bullying he had endured from Gokboik and Yun Wook-young. Sa Peigang questioned if Tan Lijiang was really willing to give up this precious opportunity to prove himself to everyone who had treated him with contempt. At this moment, Tan Lijiang remembered Yun Wook-young's face as he felt determined to make his decision. He gripped his weapon tightly and apologized to instructor Sa Peigang for his previous hesitation. Tan Lijiang stood firmly and told Sa Peigang that he was prepared to endure a full day of difficult training if he had to, and asked him to continue the evasion training. Tan Lijiang was surprised by Sa Peigang's words, who dismissed the idea that he would only train him for one day, and instead assured him that he would train like this non-stop for the entire remaining week. Tan Lijiang felt panic and disbelief when he heard he had to train continuously for the whole week, and he tried to back away, astonished by his instructor's excessive enthusiasm. Sa Peigang charged at him with great enthusiasm, shouting that he was coming for him in an extremely harsh training session. Tan Lijiang raised his hands in terror, asking his instructor to wait and stop for a moment, but to no avail. Tan Lijiang received a fierce blow and screamed from the intense pain on the training ground. After a full week had passed, the day of the decisive duel between Tan Lijiang and Yun Wook-young arrived. Large crowds of students and teachers at Dragon Spring Academy gathered around the dueling arena to watch the anticipated match. The students began to talk with great anticipation and excitement as they waited for the duel to begin. Yun Wook-young appeared standing with complete confidence in the middle of the arena, holding his weapon and waiting calmly and steadily for the duel to start. On the other side, Tan Lijiang stood with clear bruises on his face, looking tense and tired from the effects of the harsh training he had endured all week. The students began to whisper among themselves, wondering how long Tan Lijiang would last in this duel, especially with his apparent injuries and fatigue. One student sarcastically said that Tan Lijiang would be defeated with a single blow and would collapse to the ground immediately. Another student wondered if Tan Lijiang had trained well and taken special measures for this duel, to which his classmate replied that he had seen him several times during his strange training. The student recalled scenes of Tan Lijiang's harsh training, receiving continuous blows from his instructor with a stick for the entire past week. And Tan Lijiang looked extremely tired from the amount of training and the injuries he had sustained. Gokboik watched the scene sarcastically, describing Tan Lijiang as foolish and naive for believing Sa Peigang's words and putting himself in this difficult situation. Gokboik continued his sarcasm and belittlement of Tan Lijiang, considering that he had absolutely no chance of winning against Yun Wook-young. Gokboik directed his words to Tan Lijiang in his mind, saying that he had fallen victim to the lies and deception of instructor Sa Peigang and had dug his own grave. Yun Wook-young spoke, addressing instructor Sa Peigang formally before the duel began. Yun Wook-young explained that, although he had previously said he wanted nothing from Sa Peigang, he now wanted to set his own condition. Yun Wook-young asked Sa Peigang to leave the academy himself if he lost, asserting that he did not want to waste his time in this way again. Sa Peigang immediately and with full confidence agreed to Yun Wook-young's condition and swore on his name to abide by the condition. Sa Peigang reminded Yun Wook-young of his own condition as well, which was that Yun Wook-young must commit to attending all his training sessions without objection if he lost. Sa Peigang smiled slyly and warned Yun Wook-young that the person he should be focusing on at this moment was not him, but Tan Lijiang in the dueling arena. Tan Lijiang stood firmly in the dueling arena, fully prepared to begin this fateful duel. Yun Wook-young looked at Tan Lijiang silently and with intense focus, also ready to fight. Sa Peigang clapped, officially announcing the start of the duel between the two students. Sa Peigang began to explain the rules of the duel, confirming that victory would be achieved if one of the parties lost consciousness, surrendered, or dropped their weapon. Sa Peigang also added that delivering fatal or life-threatening blows was strictly forbidden and that he was the final judge in this duel. The duel between Tan Lijiang and Yun Wook-young began amidst intense tension and anticipation from all those present. Sa Peigang announced the official start of the duel with clear enthusiasm, gesturing for them to begin the fight. Tan Lijiang prepared himself, focusing intensely and determined to fight seriously. The duel began with force, and Yun Wook-young took a serious combat stance. Tan Lijiang took a deep breath and began to gather his internal energy, showing intense focus in the confrontation. Yun Wook-young rushed with great speed towards Tan Lijiang, attacking suddenly and powerfully. Tan Lijiang suffered a direct injury to his arm as a result of Yun Wook-young's swift attack, and surprise and shock appeared on his face. Tan Lijiang felt confused and disbelieving of what had just happened, and the effects of the attack began to show on him. Tan Lijiang's weapon fell to the ground after the violent attack he sustained, and he felt he was on the verge of surrendering. Tan Lijiang heard a voice inside him calling him to surrender and end the duel immediately. But he was surprised when he realized that his arm was intact, and that what had happened was just an illusion or a figment of his imagination. Yun Wook-young looked at Tan Lijiang with contempt, considering him a fool for agreeing to this duel despite his obvious weakness. Yun Wook-young continued his sarcastic remarks, pointing out that Tan Lijiang began to tremble from just a simple killing intent that he had shown. Tan Lijiang trembled as he thought that what he had felt before was just Yun Wook-young's strong killing intent, and that he could have indeed harmed him if he had wanted to. Tan Lijiang felt a moment of despair and began to doubt his ability to face someone everyone considered the best in the academy, especially after only a week of short training. At that moment, Sapegang called out to Tan Lijiang in a clear and steady voice to restore his confidence and remind him of the purpose of this duel. Sapegang smiled confidently as he looked towards Tan Lijiang, showing his great confidence in his ability to face him. Sapegang displayed a very strong and majestic aura, as if he wanted to send a message to Tan Lijiang to restore his self-confidence. Tan Lijiang laughed a little nervously as he tried to refocus on the confrontation. Tan Lijiang began to remind himself of the real reason behind his insistence on continuing the fight. Tan Lijiang affirmed to himself with all determination that he truly wanted to become stronger than he was now. Tan Lijiang regained his confidence and remembered the day he decided he wanted to become stronger after a full week of hard training. Yun Wook-young considered Tan Lijiang a fool for not taking the opportunity he had given him to withdraw from the duel peacefully. Yun Wook-young prepared to execute a powerful attack on Tan Lijiang to end the duel quickly. Yun Wook-young rushed with immense force towards Tan Lijiang, launching a violent and stunning attack. And Yun Wook-young declared as he launched the attack that Tan Lijiang had brought this situation upon himself. Their weapons crossed in a decisive moment of the fight, and sparks flew from the intensity of the clash between them. The scene concluded with the faces of the two combatants, Tan Lijiang and Yun Wook-young, closing in on each other, exchanging looks of challenge and determination, declaring that this duel would not be easy for either of them. Yun Wook-young was surprised by Tan Lijiang's quick reaction, wondering in astonishment to himself how he managed to react in time. Their weapons clashed again with great force, and Tan Lijiang realized the situation was very dangerous, and he was close to receiving a direct hit. Tan Lijiang maintained his balance quickly and with extreme caution, and realized that the energy he had gathered had almost dispersed due to that attack. Yun Wook-young began to execute the first technique of the Supreme Sword style, the Sky-Shattering Heavenly Dragon Sword. Yun Wook-young launched a very powerful attack using the Raging Dragon's Wrathful Current technique, which surprised Tan Lijiang with the intensity of the attack's power. Tan Lijiang felt extreme fear and tension as he watched the power of the sword and the immense pressure resulting from Yun Wook-young's attack. But despite this immense pressure, Tan Lijiang began to feel that Yun Wook-young's attacks were becoming easier than expected for him. Signs of astonishment and surprise appeared on the faces of the students watching this confrontation, with some of them noticing a clear improvement in Tan Lijiang's performance. Yun Wook-young paused for a moment and admitted to Tan Lijiang that it seemed like he had indeed learned something new during the past week. Yun Wook-young began to execute the third technique of the Supreme Sword style, the Sky-Shattering Heavenly Dragon Sword, in preparation for a stronger attack. Yun Wook-young rushed towards Tan Lijiang using the Twin Dragon's Fang Slash technique, an attack of devastating power. Tan Lijiang was greatly shocked as he saw this technique heading directly towards him. He quickly realized that this was the same technique his instructor, Sapegang, had used during the previous grueling training sessions with him. The blow struck the ground with immense force, causing a great shockwave in the area. Tan Lijiang jumped into the air, avoiding the powerful attack with great speed and agility. Yun Wook-young was very surprised when he saw Tan Lijiang succeed in easily dodging this violent blow. Tan Lijiang landed on the ground quickly, breathing heavily from the intense pressure he had been under. Despite the exhaustion and fatigue, Tan Lijiang's eyes remained focused and determined to complete the fight. Yun Wook-young attacked again with all his strength and determination, trying to end the confrontation quickly. Yun Wook-young used a series of fast and successive combat moves, trapping Tan Lijiang, who was trying hard to avoid them. Tan Lijiang felt immense pressure due to Yun Wook-young's speed and power, and he realized that these high abilities were fitting for the reputation of the devastating Sword Clan. Nevertheless, he decided to himself that this power did not mean he couldn't evade it, and he felt more confident in his ability to hold on. Yun Wook-young continued to use the sword style with great force and determination, wondering to himself why he hadn't succeeded in defeating Tan Lijiang yet, despite the clear difference in strength. At this moment, Tan Lijiang clearly realized that the sword style that Yun Wook-young was using was the same style that instructor Sapegang had trained him in for the entire past week. Yun Wook-young was surprised by a sudden change in Tan Lijiang's movements, which made him reevaluate his opponent anew. Yun Wook-young's foot landed forcefully on the ground as he prepared for the next confrontation, while the intensity of the competition between them increased. And it was a direct and violent confrontation between Yun Wook-young and Tan Lijiang, and the looks between them indicated that the confrontation had reached a very decisive point. The students watching the duel were surprised when they noticed Yun Wook-young suddenly retreat, and they began to wonder in astonishment what was actually happening. One student suggested that what was happening might be an act, but another doubted it, saying there was no reason for Yun Wook-young to act or retreat in this manner. Yoon Wook-young appeared standing firmly and silently, his eyes blazing with a clear determination to face his opponent. Yoon Wook-young gripped his weapon tightly as he prepared to resume the duel, showing great resolve. Yoon Wook-young surprised Tan Lee-jong by apologizing to him for calling him a fool, which clearly astonished Tan. Yoon Wook-young openly admitted that Tan Lee-jong had indeed learned a lot during the past week, and he showed clear respect for his development. He declared that he didn't know how Tan Lee-jong managed to learn the sky-shattering Heavenly Dragon Sword technique, but he was ready to execute it again, and with greater force. Tan Lee-jong was extremely surprised when he heard the name of the technique Yoon Wook-young was preparing to execute. Yoon Wook-young began to execute the Raging Dragon's Annihilation technique, unleashing a massive wave of energy and swords towards Tan Lee-jong. Yoon Wook-young stated that if Tan Lee-jong could also evade this technique, he would immediately admit his defeat. The students in the stands were stunned by the power of the attack, and they wondered with concern and amazement about the nature of this terrifying technique that Yoon Wook-young was executing. Even Gok Boik showed great astonishment at the ferocity of this technique, and he realized its extreme danger as he watched its destructive power. Tan Lee-jong began to move away from the center of the attack, trying to find a way to avoid the massive wave of energy that Yoon Wook-young had unleashed. He watched with anxiety and anticipation the path of Yoon Wook-young, who began to move away strangely, wondering about his true objective. The scene flashed back to the night before the duel, where Tan Lee-jong appears exhausted from the intense training with Sapai-gang, breathing with clear difficulty. Sapai-gang assured Tan Lee-jong that he had been dodging the attacks well throughout the training period, and that the confrontation was now possible. Tan Lee-jong asked Sapai-gang if he could really evade all of Yoon Wook-young's attacks, to which Sapai-gang answered clearly and sternly that he could not. Sapai-gang explained that Yoon Wook-young was not stupid, and if Tan Lee-jong continued to evade his attacks, he would start taking countermeasures to stop him. Sapai-gang continued that if Yoon Wook-young found that Tan Lee-jong had held out until the end, he would certainly use the strongest sword technique he currently possessed. Then Sapai-gang revealed the name of this dangerous technique, Raging Dragon's Annihilation, explaining that it was a technique with a massive range and huge destructive power that made it almost impossible to evade. Sapai-gang told Tan Lee-jong with all honesty that he should completely forget the idea of evading this terrifying technique. He explained that it was futile to try to jump or move away to evade this technique because it would rapidly expand to cover the entire fighting arena. And when Tan Lee-jong felt anxious and asked him how he could deal with this attack, Sapai-gang replied with confidence that there is no such thing as invincible in this world. Sapai-gang explained to Tan Lee-jong that this technique, despite its power and frightening appearance, was specifically designed to target opponents who retreat in fear of its massive power. In the end, he told him with a confident smile that there was only one way he could deal with this terrifying technique and emerge victorious. Tan Lee-jong began to move quickly and steadily, advancing forward to face Yoon Wook-young's massive attack. He continued to advance with great courage and determination as he moved towards the center of the attack, remembering his instructor's instructions to constantly move forward. Signs of determination and strength appeared on Tan Lee-jong's face as he was ready to face Yoon Wook-young's attack with all his confidence and resolve. Yoon Wook-young was surprised by Tan Lee-jong's bold and unexpected reaction, and he showed extreme astonishment and surprise. At this moment, Yoon Wook-young gripped his weapon tightly, preparing to counter Tan Lee-jong's bold move. Yoon Wook-young began to react immediately after realizing that Tan Lee-jong had managed to see the openings in his attack, and he rushed towards Tan Lee-jong with intensity and force. But Yoon Wook-young, in his current state, was merely a surprised reaction, and was not fully prepared, which gave Tan Lee-jong a golden opportunity. Tan Lee-jong realized in that decisive moment that this was his real chance to launch his attack. Tan Lee-jong remembered his instructor's previous instructions to use the suppressed anger within him to direct his attack at Yoon Wook-young. And indeed, Tan Lee-jong launched a powerful and violent attack with all his suppressed anger, heading directly towards Yoon Wook-young. Clear signs of shock and concern appeared on Yoon Wook-young's face when he saw the ferocity of the attack coming towards him. The two opponents' weapons clashed with great force, and a massive spark appeared as a result of the violent collision between them. Yoon Wook-young's weapon suddenly shattered from the force of Tan Lee-jong's attack, which surprised everyone in attendance. Instructor Sapai-gang approached Tan Lee-jong and calmly asked him how he felt at this decisive moment after successfully executing his attack. Tan Lee-jong felt confused and wondered about the instructor's intention with this question. Sapai-gang directed Tan Lee-jong's attention towards the stands, where the students began to cheer and encourage him clearly and enthusiastically. The voices of the students cheering for Tan Lee-jong rose, while anger was clearly visible on Gok Boik's face from this situation. Sapai-gang smiled confidently and asked Tan Lee-jong if he felt excitement and happiness because of what happened. Signs of happiness and confidence were clearly visible on Tan Lee-jong's face, as he confirmed with great pleasure that he truly felt happy. After the duel ended, the scene returned to the academy on a new bright day for a new semester to begin. Sapai-gang walked confidently towards the classroom, carrying the stick he used to use in training. He quietly opened the door to the room to enter the classroom, where the students were waiting for the lesson to begin. Tan Lee-jong and the other students appeared in the classroom, waiting in anticipation for the instructor to enter. Yoon Wook-young gave a sharp sidelong glance towards Instructor Sapai-gang when he entered the hall. The scene concluded with a confident smile from Sapai Gang as he announced to the students that the time for the first lesson to begin had come. The scene shifted to an angry fist slamming a table with force, its owner shouting angrily, "Damn it!" expressing the frustration he felt over the recent events. The Academy's vice director spoke with great anger about the sudden change in attitude of the students who had initially supported their plan, and now had changed and were supporting instructor Sapai Gang instead of them. The Academy's vice director, Cheon, began to feel extremely tense and frustrated, wondering how things had reached this state after he had placed his trust in the deputy responsible for managing affairs, who was supposed to get rid of instructor Sapai Gang. One of the officials expressed his intense anger while speaking with Vice Director Cheon, reminding him that the primary goal of the plan was to get rid of Sapai Gang in a way that would make him leave the academy of his own free will. The vice director seemed annoyed with the current situation, explaining that the students, especially Tan Li Zhang, the son of a weak family, and even Yoon Wook Young from the famous Yoon clan, were both now adamant about learning under Sapai Gang's supervision, which made matters worse. Yoon Wook Young suggested that if they tried again to force the students to change their classes as they did before, the students might threaten to withdraw from the academy and report it to the famous Yoon clan, which would further complicate the matter. An official angrily expressed that the decision to entrust a genius student like Yoon Wook Young to an inexperienced person like Sapai Gang was a huge mistake, and that it directly affected the academy's reputation. The vice director felt extremely angry at the officials' attempt to blame him, accusing them of being just hypocrites, trying to win the favor of the powerful Yoon clan at his expense. He then asked dismissively if they were serious in saying that Yoon Wook Young had lost to someone from the One-Star Sword clan, but the other clarified that Yoon Wook Young had technically withdrawn from the battle. The vice director's anger intensified as he refused to believe that the renowned genius Yoon Wook Young from the famous Yoon clan had actually lost to someone of a weak level, considering it unbelievable. The vice director began to feel very worried about instructor Sapai Gang, as the more he learned about him, the more mysterious he became, and it was now very necessary to monitor him and not leave him unsupervised. He suddenly remembered something important and dangerous. He asked if they had received a response from a mercenary group called the Ghost Shadow Palace regarding their request to investigate Sapai Gang, to which another replied that they had not received a response yet. The vice director felt insulted by the mercenaries' arrogant attitude and considered it rude for a group of mercenaries to dare to act this way with him. Suddenly a man from the mercenaries appeared, threatening the vice director in a frightening way, demanding that he be careful in what he says and does. The vice director felt terrified and asked in a trembling voice about the identity of the person standing behind him. The mercenary replied sarcastically, calling his question silly, which made the vice director even more tense and terrified. The vice director began to wonder to himself about the identity of this mysterious man and how he had not been able to sense him at all, despite his high martial skills. The vice director turned in terror to the mercenary, saying, "Didn't you yourselves say?" in an attempt to understand the terrifying situation he had fallen into. But the mercenary answered him calmly and coldly that they were here now to complete the mission he had requested from them. The mercenary leader asked the vice director to tell him all the information he knew about instructor Sapai Gang, and it became clear that this group of elite mercenaries in the Jianghu world is known as the Ghost Shadow Palace. After a short while, the mercenary leader appeared holding a picture of Sapai Gang, explaining that there were many rumors about him since he became an instructor at the academy. One of the mercenaries spoke mockingly about how corrupt the academy was and how its methods reflected its bad reputation, yet this was none of their business. Another mercenary laughed mockingly, saying that Orthodox academies always pretend to be honorable and upright, but in reality, they secretly request hidden investigations against their own followers. A third mercenary agreed with this opinion, considering that they were no better, as they accept these investigation requests for money. The group leader interrupted the mercenaries' conversation, clearly reminding them of their primary mission, which is to serve the person they are looking for no matter the circumstances. Mercenary number 5 apologized with great fear to the leader for his previous inappropriate words, but the leader calmly told him it was okay, and that he should just focus on the mission. Another mercenary asked if they should also investigate Jin Baek, the person who is said to have raised Sapai Gang since childhood, but the leader ordered them to focus only on locating and monitoring the target for now. A mercenary asked about the truth of the rumor that Sapai Gang had a fateful encounter, to which the leader replied seriously that they should not pay attention to such ridiculous rumors. One of them replied that the rumors say Sapai Gang was never able to use internal energy, but he suddenly became an expert in martial arts. The mercenary then continued his words in amazement, describing how this sudden transformation in Sapai Gang's power happened in just one night, which raises questions about whether he had a fateful encounter or not. Another mercenary suddenly wondered about the possibility of hidden supporters behind Sapai Gang, which caught the attention of the rest of the group. The mercenary suggested that Sapai Gang might have been planted inside the academy by a hostile group with a mysterious objective, which would explain the suspicions about him and make him a more dangerous target than they had imagined. The mercenary leader sternly warned his group members to be extremely cautious and to completely avoid being sensed by Sapai Gang, but one of them found this warning amusing and sarcastic. One of the mercenaries said with confidence that no matter how strong Sapai Gang was, he could not possibly detect the stealth techniques of the Ghost Shadow Palace. The leader replied firmly, officially announcing the start of the mission. The next morning, instructor Sapai Gang met with Dr. Jin Baek, who told him that he had heard a lot of interesting news about him within the academy recently. The doctor smiled as he expressed his astonishment at all the news that had reached him regarding Sapaigang. The doctor expressed his concern that Sapaigang might have become a target due to the actions of some people against him, but Sapaigang replied with great confidence, saying there was no need to worry, as jealousy and envy always accompany heroes. The doctor smiled and said that the fateful encounter Sapaigang had must have been truly exceptional, otherwise he would not have changed so drastically. Sapaigang laughed and remembered how it all began, admitting that he himself was shocked by the result of the duel and that perhaps he had exaggerated a little. The doctor warned him, saying that if he had lost that duel, the result would have been catastrophic, especially since Vice Director Cheon Simyong was clearly trying to get rid of him. Sapaigang fell silent for a moment and remembered the bitter truth, as he admitted to himself that he had in fact already been expelled in his previous life. He began to remember his past life before returning in time, when he was unable to use internal energy, and how he suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of Maing Sundeok. He also remembered how his position as an assistant instructor was taken away, and he was forced to work in humble and demeaning jobs. Unable to bear the constant humiliation, he was finally forced to leave the academy in disgrace. He lived through a period of being lost, where he couldn't secure a stable means of living. He ended up as a guard at an escort agency, a difficult job that required good combat skills. Although he was unable to use internal energy, he made a great effort to master martial arts and physical combat, and he was exposed to many dangerous missions, but he eventually became a first-class guard. He spent more than 10 years working as a guard, and during this period, he managed to build a wide network of contacts and information throughout the Central Plains. One day he visited the Dragon Spring Academy to see his old teacher Jin Baek again. But on the night of that specific day, something very terrifying and shocking happened. He saw with his own eyes a horrific scene of a massive demonic beast attacking the place, causing great destruction and an unforgettable tragedy. The scene returned to the present, where Sapaigang was talking with the doctor and suddenly saw something that prompted him to throw a stone forcefully away. The doctor was surprised by his action and asked him why he threw the stone in that way. Sapaigang simply replied that he saw an ugly frog and couldn't control himself. The doctor laughed and said it was surprising that Sapaigang, who used to eat frogs as medicine in his childhood, was now trying to harm an innocent frog. The stone flew with great speed towards a spot between the trees and directly hit one of the mercenaries who were hiding and watching him. One of the mercenaries asked his colleague, number 7, if he was okay. He in turn was surprised and angry, saying that madman, meaning Sapaigang, had suddenly thrown a stone at him. Mercenary number 7 wondered with concern if Sapaigang had actually discovered their presence, but his colleague reassured him, saying that if he had truly discovered them, he wouldn't have acted this way, and that what happened was just bad luck. The bald mercenary, number 5, looked angrily at mercenary number 7 and asked him with displeasure if he was really questioning the stealth techniques of the Ghost Shadow Palace because of a minor incident like this. Mercenary number 7 felt scared and confused and quickly apologized, asserting that he would not dare to do so. The bald mercenary then told him to trust in his skills more. The mercenary leader ordered the continuous monitoring of Sapaigang as he was on his way back to his residence. Sapaigang returned to his room, sitting with confidence and calm, thinking that he had finally secured Instructor Seong Dan, Tan Li Zhong, and Yoon Wook Young. He felt satisfied that his first goal after returning in time had been achieved, and he wondered to himself if the time had truly come to bring that character into the picture. He began to remember that character he wanted to summon, and he was sure that he knew exactly where they were at this time. Meanwhile, there was a knock on the door of the room, so Sapaigang told the person outside that the door was open and they could enter. Yoon Wook Young entered the room, and Sapaigang told him with a smile that he had expected his arrival and thought he would be worried by now. Yoon Wook Young asked Sapaigang with a sharp and displeased expression why he had that annoying look on his face. Sapaigang smiled calmly and sarcastically, wondering what would bring a young master of the devastating sword Yoon clan to his humble place. Yoon Wook Young seemed to hesitate for a moment as he approached Sapaigang without saying anything. Then he finally spoke and mentioned the duel that had happened earlier. Yoon Wook Young remembered how Tan Li Zhong was handling things in a clumsy but precise way, with every basic sword movement he used from the sky-shattering heavenly dragon sword technique. He admitted that he initially thought what happened was the result of just 1 week of short training, but upon deeper reflection, he found that those movements were not just fleeting responses, but something much deeper. Sapaigang looked at Yoon Wook Young with a smile and said that Tan Li Zhong's movements were as if he knew all the movements and paths of the Yoon clan's secret sword style. With clear anger, Yoon Wook Young interrogated Sapaigang, accusing him of being the one who taught Tan Li Zhong the sky-shattering heavenly dragon sword technique, and angrily questioning how an outsider could know the details of his clan's techniques. Sapaigang replied with a mysterious smile and said, "Who knows?" sarcastically mocking Yoon Wook Young's question. Yoon Wook Young continued angrily, explaining how famous his clan's techniques were among the fighters in the community, but he asserted that Tan Li Zhong's level of knowledge about them was not superficial at all. Yoon Wook Young continued to speak seriously, asking Sapaigang if he really thought he couldn't distinguish between superficial and deep knowledge, and confirmed that he would have been very disappointed if he hadn't noticed it. Sapaigang interrupted him firmly, telling him to stop trying to evade the truth. He told him to be more honest if he truly wished to be his disciple, pointing out that the real reason for his visit was something else entirely. Sapaigang explained that Yoon Wook-young came to verify if Sapaigang also knew the flaws in the sky-shattering heavenly dragon sword style, which Yoon Wook-young had discovered himself. Sapaigang began to explain the history of the sky-shattering heavenly dragon sword technique, clarifying that it had been perfected hundreds of years ago and passed down through the Yoon clan's generations as a unique sword technique. But he explained that despite its fame and great development, Yoon Wook-young, with his sharp intellect, had discovered that this technique was not invincible and was not without its weaknesses. But being the heir to the famous Yoon clan, Yoon Wook-young couldn't easily admit this and accused Sapaigang of belittling his clan's techniques. Sapaigang smiled and told him, "Think as you wish, but allow me to say just one thing." Sapaigang added in a serious tone that the near future would render all the things that fighters hold sacred, such as tradition, honor, nobility, and reputation, meaningless. He continued his speech as he looked with a firm and intense gaze at Yoon Wook-young, advising him to think about only one thing, becoming stronger than he is now. He continued his speech, advising him to cast aside anything that might obstruct his path to his goal of becoming stronger without any hesitation. Sapaigang cryptically ended his conversation and stood up to leave, promising that they would talk about this topic in more detail later. Yoon Wook-young agreed in a serious tone, stating that he would follow his instincts for now, before adding with noticeable hesitation, "Let's just say that's the case." Sapaigang suddenly picked up a wooden pillow. Yoon Wook-young asked him in surprise why he was holding it, and Sapaigang replied with a smile that it was nothing to worry about, just an annoying frog outside. Outside on the roof of a building, the group of mercenaries was watching the academy at night with precision and caution. They focused on a specific person inside the academy, Dr. Jin Baek, the head of the recovery pavilion. The mercenary leader explained that Jin Baek was an ordinary doctor in the Gamsu region, but he moved to the academy 5 years ago and became responsible for the recovery pavilion to treat injured students. Another mercenary added that although Jin Baek was a skilled doctor, he did not have a distinguished martial background, and they had investigated him because he was the closest to Sapaigang, but he seemed to be just an ordinary doctor. But the group leader noted that Jin Baek's history seemed suspiciously clean, which raised his suspicions slightly. Suddenly, the mercenary noticed his colleague, number 7, and asked him with surprise why his expression looked so strange. Mercenary number 7 seemed hesitant and embarrassed as he tried to explain what had happened to him, but he couldn't speak clearly. Mercenary number 7 remembered the previous moments, where he had received powerful blows from things Sapaigang had thrown in their direction, which caused large cuts and bruises on his face. The mercenary leader asked if they were sure they hadn't been discovered after these incidents, to which the bald mercenary replied that he was certain the academy was unaware of their presence. But mercenary number 7 expressed strong doubts, asserting that he believed they had already been discovered. The leader replied sharply, telling him not to doubt their clan's stealth techniques, considering that Sapaigang might just have a bad habit of throwing things randomly. The leader asked mercenary number 7 to endure a little longer, reminding him that he had been through worse. Number 7 weakly agreed, on the verge of tears. Mercenary number 7 began to give a warning in advance, saying that if something similar happened again, he would not hesitate to confront Sapaigang himself. His colleague reassured him that they had now moved a bit further away from the academy's residences, so it was unlikely that such incidents would be repeated. But mercenary number 7 remained anxious and wondered sarcastically what if Sapaigang suddenly woke up and decided to practice archery on them. His colleague quickly told him to be quiet. Suddenly, the mercenaries noticed someone approaching and told each other to hide quickly. Sapaigang suddenly appeared in the area, walking calmly, saying to himself that he felt a strong urge to relieve himself. Sapaigang stood near the bushes, saying to himself in an audible voice that he had probably drunk too much tea, which surprised the hiding mercenaries. Mercenary number 7 was terrified when he realized that Sapaigang was about to relieve himself in the same spot where they were hiding. And indeed, Sapaigang began to relieve himself on mercenary number 7, who was extremely terrified. Mercenary number 7 stood up angrily, shouting and cursing at Sapaigang with great agitation. But Sapaigang didn't seem surprised at all by what happened. Instead, he looked at him very calmly with a gentle smile on his face. Sapaigang appeared sarcastically holding a teapot in his hand and asked the mercenary with a calm smile if he would like a cup of tea. Mercenary number 7 stood shocked and angry, realizing that Sapaigang had known about their presence from the beginning and had done it on purpose. The mercenary drew his weapon in anger as he rushed towards Sapaigang, threatening him with death. But Sapaigang countered the attack with extreme ease, using a powerful magical barrier to block the mercenary's attack, which surprised the latter. The mercenary felt a great shock upon seeing the barrier shatter his weapon without any effort. Sapaigang responded with a very swift and violent counterattack, decisively hitting the mercenary and knocking him forcefully to the ground. Sapaigang smiled in a terrifying way and said, addressing the mercenary leader, "Pleased to finally meet you, Ghost Shadow Palace." The bald mercenary number 5 shouted in terror and concern for the defeated mercenary number 7, while Sapaigang sarcastically commented that he deserved this for sticking his nose into other people's business. Sapaigang turned with a sarcastic smile to the rest of the mercenaries and addressed them, saying, "My dear friends from the Ghost Shadow Palace." But mercenary number 5 drew his weapon very quickly as he rushed towards him in anger, calling him a scoundrel. The mercenary leader ordered number 5 to fall back immediately, before personally intervening to confront Sapaigang. The mercenary leader advanced towards Sapaigang with a formal greeting, expressing his astonishment that he had actually discovered their presence. Sapaigang smiled confidently, confirming his identity, and told the leader that he must be the leader of these frog mercenaries. Then Sapaigang mocked him, questioning if it was truly wise for the mercenary to reveal his identity so clearly in front of the target they were monitoring. The mercenary leader responded coldly and calmly, considering that if he killed him here, it would not cause any problem. Sapaigang laughed and asked him sarcastically if he was really sure about that, and wondered if curiosity hadn't driven him to find out how he knew all these things about them. The leader replied with calm anger that he would know soon enough. Sapaigang decided to start the fight seriously, and threatened the mercenaries, saying he would cut off their limbs one by one. An immense magical energy appeared from Sapaigang's hand as he prepared to begin the actual fight. Sapaigang launched a powerful magical attack using Mana Blade, which clashed fiercely with the mercenaries' weapons. The exchange of swift and powerful attacks continued between Sapaigang and the mercenaries, where it was clear that the combat level of both sides was very high. Sapaigang masterfully blocked the mercenaries' attack with his magical sword, proving exceptionally high combat skills. He smiled as he said, "Not so fast," in a clear indication of his complete control over the situation. The violent fight continued, and the exchange of blows between them went on intensively, with both showing exceptional strength. Sapaigang noticed that the mercenary leader's power, although not as destructive as Akgogeum's, was extremely fast, precise, and deadly. He realized that the density of the magical energy carried by the mercenary leader's attacks was immense, and he could not continue to block them using only barriers. Nevertheless, he felt excited as he affirmed that this was the type of fight he truly preferred. The fight paused for a few moments, and both parties looked at each other cautiously, while the leader felt there was something strange about Sapaigang's power and style. The mercenary leader pointed out that the power and style Sapaigang was using were completely different from the martial arts used by the orthodox sects. He said seriously that this power could not have possibly appeared in Sapaigang by chance, and he wondered if this power was indeed demonic arts. Sapaigang responded to the mercenary leader's accusation and mocked the claim, asserting that the demonic sect had fallen many years ago and that what he was saying was just nonsense. He then continued his speech, stating unequivocally that this power had nothing to do with demonic arts, but he admitted that the power he uses is not traditional martial arts either. The mercenary leader then realized that Sapaigang was a strong opponent who could not be easily controlled, and he began to prepare for a serious attack, declaring that, although there was no personal grudge between them, he would kill him. The mercenary leader began to execute the techniques of the Ghost Shadow Palace at full power, 100%, declaring that killing Sapaigang was for the sake of accomplishing the palace's mission. The mercenary leader launched a very fast and powerful attack towards Sapaigang, which had a violent impact on the ground. Sapaigang watched calmly and with surprise as the trees were hit by the violent blows resulting from the mercenary leader's power, which indicated the danger of this attack. The mercenary began to execute a special and exclusive movement technique called Soul-Shattering Step, filling the area with immense speed and destructive energy. The leader's features appeared as he rushed at a very high speed after having completely concealed his presence, creating a state of confusion for the opponent due to his very fast movement. In this critical moment of confusion, the mercenary leader launched a deadly and swift attack that could not be easily noticed or seen. Sapaigang was suddenly hit by the attack, and his arm was severed. But it turned out that this was an illusion created by Sapaigang. The mercenary leader was completely surprised by the illusion technique and found himself facing a sudden counterattack. The mercenary leader received a direct and powerful blow from Sapaigang that caused him to fall to the ground very quickly. The bald mercenary, number 5, was surprised by what happened to his leader and shouted in alarm, calling out, "Sir!" as their leader fell to the ground in a humiliating manner. The mercenary leader got up with difficulty, in pain and with visible injuries, and asked Sapaigang angrily how he had discovered their location so easily. At this moment, Sapaigang used a spell called Search, which allowed him to see the mercenaries with perfect clarity, confirming that he could see them easily. Sapaigang advanced towards the fallen mercenaries with great confidence and sarcasm, and suggested they have a deeper and more serious conversation. The mercenary leader was surprised and wondered who Sapaigang really was, then came to the conclusion that he might be connected to the leader of the Origin sect. Sapaigang began to talk about the Origin sect, a secret and mysterious sect that never appears openly in the events of the Jianghu, and its true objectives are completely hidden. Sapaigang mentioned an incident that occurred decades ago, when a genocide took place that targeted direct blood relatives and led to the death of the leader, an incident that most people of the Jianghu did not notice. He explained that the only ones who knew the truth of what happened were those who were born and raised within the Origin sect and remained loyal to it until the end. Sapaigang revealed that the survivors of that massacre reappeared under the name Ghost Shadow Palace, where they gathered information from all over the Jianghu. He pointed out that the Ghost Shadow Palace has now become a high-level mercenary organization that deals with all dangerous and dirty tasks. He explained that the true goal of the Ghost Shadow Palace is to revive the fallen Origin sect, and that this is the mission they always talk about. The mercenary leader was completely stunned by what he heard from Sapaigang and shouted that it was impossible for him to know this information. The leader continued, saying that the true history of the sect is considered a top-level secret that has never been revealed for decades, wondering how Sapaigang could know that. Sapaigang said clearly and directly that if the mercenaries performed just 2 tasks for him, he would give them the information they had been searching for a long time. The leader felt extremely angry at Sapaigang's audacity in his proposal and slammed his hand on the ground, shouting, "How dare you say such nonsense!" The mercenary leader began to explain angrily to Sapaigang how they spent 20 full years roaming the Central Plains, searching for a faint hope, all for their secret mission. The mercenary leader shouted with great anger in Sapaigang's face, asking if he truly understood what they had been searching for all this long time. Then the mercenary leader revealed that their true goal was the blood of the origin sect. Sapaigang replied calmly and with complete confidence, explaining that it was specifically a unique bloodline that allows its owner to fully inherit the special martial arts of the origin sect, and that this person has a strange birthmark on their left wrist. The mercenary leader was very surprised because Sapaigang knew this secret information, which represented the core of reviving their sect, and the real reason for their constant wandering in search of it. The mercenary leader asserted that even within the Ghost Shadow Palace, only a few knew this secret, wondering how Sapaigang could know this dangerous information. Sapaigang decided to end the conversation and told the mercenary leader clearly, "That's enough. I won't tell you more than that. Now choose." Sapaigang continued his speech while smiling sarcastically and told the leader that he must accept his request to get the information or spend the rest of his life chasing and monitoring others, then indirectly threatened him to continue the fight if he wished. The leader felt extremely confused and fell silent as he contemplated the difficult choices Sapaigang had laid before him. Finally, after clear hesitation, the mercenary leader decided to agree to the mission Sapaigang had offered him. But the leader clearly threatened Sapaigang that if he found out he was deceiving them, he would make him pay a very heavy price. Sapaigang smiled with satisfaction and told him that he would now give him the first mission. The scene shifted to another place, where a group of people appeared covered in their own blood, groaning and in pain from the severity of their wounds. In the same place, a strong woman appeared, interrogating and severely torturing one of the people, while the man begged her to stop in great pain. The woman gripped the man's face with great force and used a strange and frightening energy to torture him, which increased his pain. The woman continued to torture the man cruelly and with extreme coldness, using terrifying and frightening techniques to completely paralyze his movement. The man's identity was clearly revealed. He was the vice captain of the Black Scorpion Gang, known as the Destructive Fist Demon Ma Kui. The woman explained with great anger that this man and his gang had attacked this place a month ago, killed the men, and raped all the women. The woman continued her speech, saying that she had been tasked by the surviving women to ensure he was killed, which terrified him greatly. The man tried to use his internal energy to defend himself, but he discovered he was completely unable to gather his energy. The man was extremely surprised as he wondered in terror what was happening, and he felt his internal life force slowly fading for no apparent reason, which terrified him even more. The man began to threaten the woman with clear anger and desperation, asking her if she wasn't afraid of the consequences of her actions. But the woman completely ignored his threats and told him with clear anger, "I told you before that I am the vice captain of the Black Scorpion Gang, you fool." Then she raised her weapon to finish him off. The woman ended the man's life with a swift and decisive blow, completely ending his suffering. The woman stood calmly and confidently after the fight ended and sighed a little from fatigue. Then a white bird flew towards her at great speed, a clear sign that she was receiving a new mission. The woman received a message from the white bird and wondered with interest about the next mission she had been assigned. The woman read the message with concentration and discovered that her next target was Sapaigang, an instructor at the Dragon Spring Academy. The scene shifted to the Dragon Spring Academy, where Tan Li Zhang was training with great intensity, shouting loudly during his training. Sapaigang approached him and ordered him to stop being tense and to relax a little, and he gave him clear instructions to adjust the position of his body and arm during the training. Sapaigang seemed annoyed by the disrespectful way one of the disciples was addressing him, and he jokingly threatened to hit him, but the disciple asked him to wait and hear him out first. The disciple pointed his hand at Yun Wook-young, angrily questioning why Sapaigang wasn't giving him any instructions, while Yun Wook-young appeared to be unoccupied. Yun Wook-young appeared on the training ground, holding his weapon with firmness and focus, but in reality he seemed inactive, or not doing anything. Sapaigang answered coldly and calmly that Yun Wook-young was working well on his own, which surprised the disciple, who thought Yun Wook-young was doing nothing at all. Sapaigang hit the disciple with his stick as punishment, while the disciple felt pain and complained about the force of the blow. Sapaigang sharply replied that he should stop whining and focus more on his training. Meanwhile, on the other side, Yun Wook-young was engrossed in internal training and focus. Sapaigang praised Yun's exceptional talent to himself, affirming that if he continued like this, he would reach a much higher level. Suddenly, Tan Li Zhang approached Sapaigang with a shy call, saying, "Master, зрение, с выражением великой обеспокоенности на его лице." Sapaigang asked him whether he had completed his internal energy circulation or not, to which Tan Li Zhang replied nervously that he hadn't, and that he was still very worried. Tan Li Zhang asked with great concern if it was really enough to just follow Sapaigang's instructions to overcome his problem. Sapaigang answered clearly that there was no other way but to accumulate internal energy. Then he joked, saying there was no other way unless he was secretly hiding a rare elixir that could help him overcome his problem quickly. Sapaigang told Tan Li Zhang to continue training in internal energy circulation all day, except for eating and sleeping times only, and Tan Li Zhang agreed in a weak voice. Sapaigang realized that Tan Li Zhang was feeling pressured and stressed because of the approaching duel, and that he was well aware that his previous victory over Yun Wook-young was due to tricks and not real strength. He noted to himself that Tan Lijiang's problem could not be solved immediately, and that there was a more important matter he had to deal with now. Sapaigang thought to himself, wondering how many days had passed since he spoke with the mercenaries and gave them the mission. His train of thought was interrupted by a voice calling out to him saying, "Instructor Sapaigang," which made him turn quickly to see who was calling him. Sapaigang showed a slight annoyance when he saw who was calling him. The person who had called him was Instructor Bo Hyung, who greeted him calmly, commenting on Sapaigang's unwelcoming facial expression. Sapaigang replied sharply that he was busy training his students and did not want to be disturbed, but Bo Hyung got angry with him and accused him of lying, saying that he had been loitering for a long time doing nothing. Bo Hyung recalled the day he witnessed Sapaigang's true power and spoke with anger and frustration, then directly ordered him to go to the main hall immediately. Sapaigang headed to the main hall where the academy's vice director, Cheon Simyong, was waiting to meet him. Vice Director Cheon Simyong greeted Sapaigang and asked him how things were going. Sapaigang replied with a broad smile, pretending to be happy, saying that things were absolutely wonderful and that training talented students like these made him feel the value of being a first instructor every day. Sapaigang added that all the credit goes to the vice director for establishing an excellent class of talented students, which greatly pleased the vice director. The vice director said he knew things were going well with him, but he clarified that Dragon Spring Academy is a martial arts academy affiliated with the Orthodox Alliance. He continued saying that the alliance seemed concerned about him becoming a first instructor despite his lack of necessary experience. Sapaigang replied sarcastically, "Oh? And does the Orthodox Alliance really care about a simple instructor like me?" A woman suddenly interrupted him, demanding respect, saying, "Be respectful, Instructor Sapaigang." A young woman entered the hall and offered her apologies, saying she was sorry that the Orthodox Alliance had sent a special inspector to support Sapaigang in his work. The woman introduced herself respectfully and said with a smile, "Welcome, Instructor Sapaigang." She identified herself as Mei Seol-ran and that she was sent from the inspection department of the Orthodox Alliance. Sapaigang appeared stunned and frozen in place after hearing what Mei Seol-ran said, which made her call out to him questioningly, "Instructor?" due to her surprise at his strange reaction. Sapaigang quickly apologized with a broad laugh, using the excuse that he was captivated by Mei Seol-ran's beauty, which made her laugh gently and thank him for the compliment. Meanwhile, the academy's vice director, Cheon Simyong, spoke seriously, explaining that Inspector Mei Seol-ran is a rising combat expert in the Orthodox Alliance, and that she managed to reach the pinnacle of combat strength at a very young age. The vice director asked Sapaigang not to act recklessly, to do his best as a first instructor, and to be careful in his dealings with Inspector Mei Seol-ran, and not to be disrespectful to her. Sapaigang replied with great cheerfulness, assuring that he would certainly do so, but his expression then changed to reveal great seriousness. Later, Sapaigang met with the mercenary leader in an isolated place, and the leader said that he would now tell him the details of his first mission. Sapaigang asked the mercenary leader if he knew the famous assassin nicknamed the Soul-Stealing Heavenly Maiden. The mercenary leader replied with confusion and wonder that of course he knew her, but he didn't understand why Sapaigang had suddenly mentioned her name now. The leader began to explain details about this famous assassin, pointing out that she is a professional killer who works alone without any affiliations or companions, and she is known for never failing to carry out any mission assigned to her. The leader continued his speech, stating that he had not met her personally, but her victims were always found without their souls, and he also pointed to the rumors describing her beauty as unparalleled. The mercenary leader asked with clear concern if Sapaigang's mission was to kill this dangerous assassin, but Sapaigang replied with a mysterious smile, confirming that this was not the objective of the mission. Sapaigang asked the mercenary leader to summon the soul-stealing Heavenly Maiden here to the Dragon Spring Academy. The leader was surprised by this unexpected request, while Sapaigang continued to explain precisely what he wanted, asking him to inform Vice Director Cheon Simyong that unforeseen circumstances had forced him to cancel the mission he had previously requested. The mercenary leader was extremely shocked by Sapaigang's request to cancel the mission and shouted out in surprise. The leader went to Vice Director Cheon Simyong's office to inform him of the mission's cancellation, which angered the Vice Director due to the mercenary's irresponsibility and failure to inform him earlier. The mercenary leader sincerely apologized, asserting that nothing could be done as an emergency had arisen, and he offered to find a perfectly suitable replacement for this mission, while also compensating the Vice Director with the mission fee as an apology. The mercenary leader thought with concern, telling himself that he had previously contacted the soul-stealing Heavenly Maiden for past missions, so he was able to contact her again. The leader wondered to himself with great anxiety why Sapaigang had requested the summoning of a professional and dangerous assassin like her, explaining that she is a merciless killer who never misses, and that no matter how strong Sapaigang was, she would find a way to kill him. Sapaigang smiled and cheerfully asked the leader if he was worried about him, but the mercenary leader confirmed that he was indeed worried, because if Sapaigang died before he got the information he was promised, he would be the one facing the dilemma. Sapaigang calmly admitted that the leader was right to be concerned, and acknowledged that she was a very dangerous woman. Sapaigang concluded the scene with a calm smile, asserting that this danger was the main reason why he needed to summon this assassin even more.